I signed the papers to sell my logistics empire for $300 million, and to celebrate, my only daughter tried to murder me with a glass of vintage Pinot Noir. She did not know. I saw her do it, and when her husband started foaming at the mouth 20 minutes later, she did not call 911. She looked me dead in the eye and screamed, "Why did you switch the glasses?" That was the moment I knew my little girl was gone and the war had begun. My name is Luther Banks. I am 72 years old, and I built Banks Trans from a single rusted truck into the biggest freight network in Atlanta I have faced. Union strikes, highway bandits, and corporate sharks without blinking, but nothing prepared me for the cold steel of betrayal from my own blood. If you are watching this, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments where you are listening from, because this story is a warning to every parent who thinks money can buy loyalty. It was supposed to be a victory lap. My lawyer Cohen had just finalized the preliminary terms with the buyers. $300 million cash. A lifetime of sweating diesel and grease was about to turn into generational wealth for my daughter Nia and her husband Chase. I wanted to surprise them, so I booked the best table at Le Monde, the kind of place where the waiters wear tuxedos and the menu does not have prices. I sat there adjusting my silk tie, feeling like an imposter in my own bespoke suit. Give me a diner and a cup of black coffee any day. But Nia loved this stuff. She loved the crystal chandeliers, the hushed whispers of the Atlanta elite, the smell of money. Chase was sitting across from me, swirling his wine like he was some kind of European prince. He is a white boy, 35 years old, with soft hands that have never held anything heavier than a golf club. He runs some investment fund that I have never quite understood. He talks a lot about leverage and crypto, but all I see is a man who spends money. He does not have. Nia sat next to him, looking nervous. She kept checking her phone, her leg bouncing under the table. She looked beautiful in her red dress, but her eyes were darting around the room like a trapped animal. I thought she was just anxious about the deal. I thought she was worried about her old man selling the family legacy. I was wrong. My phone buzzed on the white tablecloth. It was the buyer's legal team. I had to take it. "Excuse me," I said, standing up. My knees popped, a reminder of 40 years climbing in and out of truck cabs. I walked toward the lobby, away from the noise of the dining room. The call was short, just a confirmation of the wire transfer schedule for the next morning. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I was finally done. I was going to retire, buy a boat, maybe fish, until the good Lord called me home. I hung up and turned to go back to the table. That is when Jamal stopped me. Jamal was our waiter, a young brother, maybe 22 years old, skinny, with eyes that had seen too much struggle. I had noticed him earlier because he reminded me of myself at that age. "Hungry and invisible, Mr. Banks," he whispered, his voice trembling so hard the water pitcher in his hand shook. "Please do not look at your table. Just listen to me." I frowned, leaning in close. "What is it, son? Did they complain about the service?" "No, sir." Jamal swallowed hard, checking to make sure the maitre d' was not watching. He stepped closer, and the fear in his eyes was cold and real. "When you stepped away, your daughter." She opened her ring. There was a hidden compartment. She poured a white powder into your wine glass. She stirred it with her pinky finger, and then she smiled at her husband. "Please, sir, do not drink it." Time stopped. The restaurant noise faded into a dull hum. I looked at Jamal, searching for a lie, for a hustle, but all I saw was terror. He was risking his job, maybe his life, to warn an old man he barely knew. "Thank you, son," I said, my voice sounding like gravel grinding together. I slipped a $100 bill into his pocket, not as a tip, but as a promise. "Keep your head down. Watch what happens next." I turned back toward table 4. My heart was pounding a rhythm I had not felt since I was hauling cargo through a blizzard in 82, fear mixed with a cold, hard rage. I looked at them from across the room. Chase was laughing, showing his perfect white teeth. Nia was smoothing her napkin, looking innocent, looking like the little girl I used to carry on my shoulders. She had poisoned my drink, my Nia, the girl whose tuition I paid. The girl whose tears I wiped when her mother Betty died. She wanted me dead for the money. I walked back to the table, forcing my face into a mask of jovial ignorance. I had to act fast. I had to be smart. I was not just a businessman. I was a trucker, and on the road you learn to think on your feet. "Sorry about that, folks," I said, my voice booming. "Just wrapping up the details. Looks like we are going to be very, very rich." Chase. Seth's eyes lit up like a slot machine. "Fantastic. Luther, truly fantastic. We should toast to that." He reached for the bottle to pour more, but I stopped him. No. Let's drink what we have," I said, sitting down heavily. I pretended to be clumsy, letting my elbow knock into the breadbasket, sending a roll tumbling onto the floor. "Oops, clumsy old hands," I muttered. Then I made my move. As I reached down to grab the roll, I intentionally knocked the gravy boat with my other hand, sending a wave of dark brown sauce splashing all over Chase's pristine white shirt. "Oh Lord," I shouted, standing up, creating a scene. "I am so sorry, Chase. Look at that mess." Chase jumped up, cursing, "Damn it, Luther. This is a custom Armani shirt." Nia panicked, grabbing her napkin. "Oh my God, let me help you, honey." She turned her body toward Chase, dabbing frantically at his chest, creating a wall between us and the table. The chaos was perfect. The waiters rushed over, offering club soda. The diners at the next table turned to watch the spectacle. In that split second of distraction, while Nia was scrubbing Chase's shirt and Chase was looking down at his ruined suit, I reached out with a hand that used to change tires in the rain. Fast and steady, I switched our wine glasses. They were identical, crystal goblets filled with the same dark red liquid. I pulled my glass, the one with the powder, toward Chase's placemat and slid his clean glass in front of me. It took less than a second. I sat back down, looking flustered and apologetic. "I will buy you 10 shirts. Chase, stop fussing. Sit down. Let us toast," I said, channeling the authority that made grown men tremble at the loading docks. Chase sat down, grumbling, still wiping his lap. Nia sat back down, her face pale. She looked at my glass, then at me, her eyes checking to make sure I was going to drink. She did not notice the switch. She was too focused on the kill. "To family," I said, raising the clean glass and looking my daughter dead in the eyes, "to the legacy we leave behind, and to getting exactly what we deserve." Nia's hand trembled as she raised her water glass. Chase, still annoyed, grabbed the wine glass, the one that was meant for me. "To the 300 million, he said, greed dripping from his lips. He tilted his head back and drank. He drank it all in one big gulp, like a man thirsty for gold. I watched him swallow the liquid that was supposed to stop my heart. I brought my glass to my lips and pretended to sip, letting the liquid barely touch my tongue before setting it down. The next 20 minutes were the longest of my life. We ordered appetizers. Chase was talking about buying a villa in Tuscany, about how he could manage the family portfolio. Now that I was retiring, he was spending my money with every breath, talking over me, disrespecting me just like he always did. But tonight I listened, I nodded, I let him dig his own grave. Around the 18-minute mark, Chase stopped talking. Mid-sentence, he frowned, touching his temple. "Is it hot in here?" he mumbled, loosening his tie. Sweat started to bead on his forehead, big oily drops. He looked at Nia. "Babe, I don't feel so good." Nia froze. She looked at him, then she looked at me, confusion washing over her face. "You probably just ate too fast." "Honey, drink some water?" she said, her voice rising in pitch. She was trying to keep it together, but I saw the panic starting to bloom. She knew the timeline. She knew what was coming. Chase tried to stand up, but his legs gave out. He collapsed back into his chair, knocking over the empty wine glass. It shattered on the floor, a loud crash that silenced the entire restaurant. His hands started to claw at his throat. His eyes rolled back into his head, showing only the whites. He started to convulse, shaking violently. The foam started to bubble at the corners of his mouth, pink and frothy. "Oh my God, someone help him!" A woman at the next table screamed. The restaurant erupted into chaos. Waiters dropped trays. The manager came running, telling someone to call 911. I sat still, my hands folded on the table, watching the man who wanted me dead writhing on the floor. And then it happened. The moment that broke me completely. A normal wife, a loving wife, would have screamed for a doctor. She would have been on her knees, holding his hand, begging him to stay with her. But Nia, she did not look at Chase. She looked at me. She stood up, her chair flying backward, and pointed a manicured finger at my face. Her eyes were wild, filled with a hate so pure it was terrifying. "You!" she screamed over the noise of the dying man. "Why are you okay? Why did you switch the glasses? You killed him." The restaurant went silent except for Chase's gurgling breaths. Everyone heard her, the waiters, the diners, the manager. They all stared at the woman accusing her father of murder while her husband lay dying. She had confessed without realizing it. She admitted she knew the glasses were switched. She admitted she knew one of them was deadly. I stood up slowly, towering over her. I did not switch anything. "Nia," I said, my voice calm, cold, deadly. I just watched him drink to his greed. Looks like it didn't agree with him. Chase's body went rigid one last time, and then he went limp. His breathing shallow and ragged. The sirens were wailing in the distance, getting closer. but I knew the damage was done. Whatever poison she had used was meant to look like a heart attack on an old man like me, but on a young man like Chase it looked like exactly what it was, murder. The paramedics burst in, pushing past the stunned crowd. They started working on Chase, ripping open his shirt, exposing the chest I had ruined with sauce just minutes ago. Police officers followed close behind, scanning the room. Nia was hyperventilating now, realizing what she had said, realizing the trap had snapped shut on her own fingers. She looked at me, pleading now. "Daddy, do something. Tell them it was an accident. Tell them you did it," she whispered, trying to grab my arm. I pulled away from her touch like she was fire. "Do not touch me," I said loud enough for the police officer approaching us to hear. "I am not your daddy anymore." The officer, a sergeant with a grim face, stepped between us. "Sir, Ma, I need you both to step back. Is this man your husband?" he asked Naya. She nodded, unable to speak. He turned to me. "And you are the father-in-law?" "Yes, officer," I said, my voice steady. "I am Luther Banks. I think my son-in-law has been poisoned, and I think you should check that broken wine glass on the floor before they clean it up." Nia gasped, her knees buckling. She looked at the shards of glass near Chase's hand, then at the police officer, then at me. The realization hit her. She was trapped. The paramedics loaded Chase onto the stretcher. He was alive but barely comatose. They rushed him out the red lights of the ambulance, painting the restaurant walls in flashes of blood and danger. The sergeant looked at me, then at Nehemiah. I need you to come with us to the hospital. We will need a statement, and sir, you too." I nodded, adjusting my cuffs. "I will follow in my car, officer. I have a feeling this is going to be a long night." As I walked out of Le Monde, leaving my daughter sobbing in the hands of the police, I caught Jamal S.I. He was standing by the kitchen door, holding a tray of unserved food. He gave me a subtle nod, a silent soldier in a war he didn't start. I nodded back, knowing I would take care of that boy later, but right now, I had a son-in-law to visit and a lawyer to call because the poison was just the beginning. They wanted my $300 million. Well, they were about to find out that Luther Banks does not give refunds, and he certainly does not die easy. The red and blue lights of the ambulance painted the walls of Le Monde in a dizzying rhythm of chaos, and my daughter Nia was putting on the performance of her life. She stood by the stretcher, holding Chase's limp hand, screaming at the paramedics while pointing a manicured finger back at me. "He is old," she yelled, her voice cracking with fake hysteria. "He is 72 years old, and he gets confused. He mixes up his heart medication with everything. Oh God, he must have dropped one of his pills into Chase's glass by mistake. Please, you have to save my husband. He is the victim of a senile old man." I stood there by the table, leaning heavily on my cane, watching her weave this narrative. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. It was brilliant in a sick, twisted way. She was not just trying to cover up the attempted murder, she was laying the groundwork for the next phase of their plan. If she could convince the police and the doctors that I was mentally incompetent, that I was a danger to myself and others, she could take control of my assets through a conservatorship. She didn't just want me dead. She wanted me erased. The police sergeant approached me, his hand resting near his belt, his eyes scanning me with a mixture of suspicion and pity. "Sir, I need you to step away from the table," he said firmly. "Do you understand what is happening here? Do you know what pills you took today? I knew I had to make a choice right then and there. I could stand tall, puff out my chest, and tell him I was Luther Banks, the man who built an empire from dirt. Or I could play the role they had cast for me." I looked at Nia, sobbing fake tears into her Hermes scarf, and I decided to give them exactly what they wanted so they would never see the knife coming. I let my shoulders slump forward, shrinking my 6-foot frame into something smaller, something fragile. I made my hands tremble violently as I reached for my cane. My eyes darted around the room, feigning confusion and fear. "I don't know, officer," I stammered, letting my voice quaver. "I take a blue pill for my pressure and a white one for my joints. Maybe I dropped it. My hands, they shake so much these days. I just wanted to celebrate. I just wanted to buy them dinner." The sergeant's posture softened immediately. He didn't see a tycoon anymore. He saw a confused grandfather who had made a tragic mistake. "Okay, Mr. Banks, let's get you to the hospital. We need to check you out too, and get a blood sample just to be sure. Come with me." As they led me out past the whispering diners and the stunned staff, a memory flashed in my mind, sharp as a razor blade. It was last week at the pool house. Chase had come over while I was organizing my weekly pill organizer. He had picked up my digoxin, the heart medication, and asked in a voice that was too casual, "Luther, what happens if someone takes too much of this?" Does the heart just stop or does it explode? I had thought it was just morbid curiosity from a man who had never seen real death. Now I knew he was researching. He was shopping for a murder weapon. The ride to the hospital was silent. I sat in the back of a patrol car watching the city of Atlanta blur past. The city I helped build now felt like a cage. When we arrived at the emergency room, the air was thick with the smell of antiseptic and despair. Naya was already there, pacing the waiting room floor, her heels clicking a frantic rhythm on the linoleum. She was on her phone, whispering furiously, but when she saw me, she hung up and rushed over, her eyes wide with that same terrifying mix of hatred and performance. "Daddy," she cried, loud enough for the nurses to hear. "Are you okay? Do you know where you are? Sit down before you hurt yourself." She guided me to a plastic chair, her grip on my arm tight enough to bruise. She was selling the story hard, making sure every witness saw the caring daughter and the befuddled father. I sat down, letting my head hang low, but my eyes were sharp, watching her every move. She sat next to me, dropping her heavy Hermes bag on the floor between us. That bag cost $20,000, money I gave her for her 30th birthday. She opened it to grab a tissue, and I saw it, a thick stack of papers peeking out from a leather folder. Legal documents. I knew what they were before I even touched them. Power of attorney, guardianship papers. She had brought them to the dinner. She had planned to make me sign them over my dead body, or, in this case, over her husband's comatose one. The doctors were busy behind the double doors working on Chase. The police officer had stepped away to get coffee, leaving us alone for a brief moment. Naya buried her face in her hands, letting out a long, shuddering breath. She thought she was winning. She thought the old man was broken. I reached into my pocket, my fingers brushing against the cold metal of the tiny device Jamal had given me weeks ago. It was a listening bug no bigger than a shirt button. High-tech military-grade stuff I used to use to track high-value shipments back in the day. I kept it on me for insurance, and tonight was the night to cash it in. "Nia," I whispered, my voice sounding weak and raspy. "I am so sorry, baby girl." I leaned in to hug her, an awkward, clumsy embrace from a scared father. She stiffened, repulsed by my touch, but she didn't pull away. She needed to maintain the act. While her arms were pinned to her sides and her face was turned away in disgust, I let my hand drop down to the open bag at her feet. With a flick of my wrist, a move I learned loading crates in the rain. I dropped the bug deep into the side pocket of her purse right next to her phone. It slid in silently, disappearing into the dark leather interior. I pulled back, wiping a fake tear from my eye. "Thank you for taking care of me," I mumbled. She smoothed her dress, looking at me with pure venom, masked as pity. "Don't worry, Daddy. We are going to take care of everything from now on. You won't have to make any more difficult decisions," she said, and the threat in her voice was clear as day. Just then, the double doors swung open, and a doctor in blue scrubs stepped out looking exhausted. "Family of Chase Miller," he called out. Naya jumped up, grabbing her bag, the bag that was now my ears inside her life, and rushed over. I followed, shuffling my feet, playing my part. "Doctor, is he alive?" Nia asked, her voice trembling with what I hoped was fear of prison rather than love. "He is alive," the doctor said, rubbing his temples. "But we have a complicated situation." The toxicology screen came back strange. "It wasn't heart medication, Mr. Banks. Your son-in-law ingested a massive dose of a synthetic neurotoxin, something similar to scopolamine but modified. It causes severe hallucinations, suggestion, susceptibility, and temporary amnesia." Nia's face went white. She knew exactly what it was because she had bought it. She had meant to wipe my memory to make me pliable enough to sign those papers and then stop my heart. But Chase had taken the full dose meant for a man twice his weight. "Can I see him?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "He is awake," the doctor warned, "but he is not lucid. He is experiencing extreme paranoia and confusion. He might not recognize you." We walked into the room. Chase was strapped to the bed, his skin gray and clammy, his eyes darting around the room like a trapped bird. When he saw Naya, he didn't smile. He didn't reach for her. Instead, he started to scream, a high-pitched, terrified sound. "The snakes," he shrieked, straining against the restraints. "Get them off me! The snakes are eating the money!" She brought the snakes. Naya froze, standing at the foot of the bed. "Chase, honey, it is me. It is Nia." She tried to step closer, but he thrashed violently, spitting foam. "No, no, no!" he yelled, looking right at her but seeing a monster. You poisoned the well. The old man knows. He knows about the account in Cayman. He saw the files. Don't let him take the money." The room went deadly silent. The doctor looked at Nia, then at me. The police officer who had followed us in took out his notebook. Chase was blabbering, his mind broken by the drugs, but in his madness he was spilling the truth. He was talking about offshore accounts, about hidden files, about the poison. Nia tried to laugh, a nervous, brittle sound. "He is hallucinating, doctor. He doesn't know what he is saying. He thinks we are in a movie or something, poor Chase." But I saw the sweat breaking out on her neck. I saw her hand clutch that Hermes bag tighter, pulling it close to her body, unknowingly pressing the microphone against her side, recording her racing heart. Chase's eyes locked onto me, and for a second the madness cleared just a fraction. He stopped screaming and whispered one word, clearly, "Run." It wasn't a warning for me, it was a warning for her. He was telling her the plan had failed, that the trap had sprung on them, but Nia was too arrogant to listen. She turned to the doctor. "Straighten him out. Sedate him. Do whatever you have to do." "I need my husband back," she demanded, her voice turning sharp, losing the sweet daughter act. I stood in the corner, clutching my cane, watching the monster I had raised try to manage the monster she had married. The police officer was watching them too, his eyes narrowing. He was starting to see the cracks in the story. He was starting to wonder why a man having a drug-induced hallucination was talking about specific bank accounts in the Cayman Islands. I leaned against the wall and let out a long, shaky breath, masking a smile. Chase was alive, but he was broken. And a broken man spills secrets faster than a drunk man spills whiskey. The war had moved from the restaurant to the hospital room, and I had just planted a spy behind enemy lines. Tonight they thought they were managing a senile old man, but they had just invited the fox into the henhouse, and I was ready to feast on their mistakes. The air in the private hospital room was cold and sterile, a sharp contrast to the feverish heat radiating from my daughter Nia. She was pacing back and forth at the foot of the bed, where Chase lay, his arms strapped down, his eyes darting around the room, seeing demons that were not there. The neurotoxin had done its job, scrambling his brain just enough to keep him out of the way but leaving him alive to suffer. I sat in the visitor's chair, slumped over my cane, watching her through half-closed eyes to anyone walking by. I was just a traumatized old man shaken by his son-in-law as sudden collapse. But inside my mind was running a diagnostic check on every angle, every threat, every opportunity. I was back in the driver's seat, hauling hazardous materials on an icy road, and one wrong move would send us all over the edge. Nia stopped pacing. She looked at the clock on the wall, then at Chase, who was mumbling about Cayman accounts and snakes in the vault. She was running out of time if Chase did not stabilize. Soon the police would return with more questions. If he kept babbling about offshore money, the feds would be next. She needed control, and she needed it now. She reached into that $20,000 Hermes bag again, her hand trembling slightly as she pulled out the leather folder I had spotted earlier. She took a deep breath, smoothed her dress, and composed her face into a mask of concerned, filial piety. It was a transformation I had seen 1,000 times before, when she wanted a new car, when she wanted tuition for a fashion degree. She never used when she wanted me to pay for Chase's investment. "Seed money, Daddy," she said, her voice dropping to a soft, pleading whisper. She pulled a chair close to mine, invading my space with the scent of her expensive perfume, a smell that now turned my stomach. "Listen to me. The doctors, they are worried about the insurance because Chase is in such a bad state. And because of the confusion at the restaurant, they need a guarantor. They need someone to authorize the advanced treatments to save his life." She placed the folder on my lap. On top was a generic-looking hospital form, but I could see the edges of the pages beneath it. They were heavy, bonded paper legal stock. "I just need you to sign here, Daddy," she said, uncapping a heavy Mont Blanc pen and pressing it into my shaking hand. "It just says you will cover the deductible if the insurance rejects it. You know how these companies are? Please, for Chase, for me." I looked at her face. Her eyes were wide, glistening with unshed tears, but her jaw was set tight. She was terrified. Yes, but she was also ruthless. She was betting everything on the fact that I was a senile, frightened old man who would sign anything to make the bad things go away. I looked down at the paper. My hand trembled, the pen tip hovering over the signature line. I was not faking. The tremor entirely, the rage coursing through my veins, was making my whole body vibrate. I used my thumb to awkwardly lift the corner of the top page just a fraction. There it was. It was not an insurance form. It was a durable power of attorney, granting Nia Banks Miller full, unrestricted control over all assets, real estate and business interests of Luther Banks effective immediately upon signature due to incapacity. She was not just trying to pay a hospital bill, she was trying to stage a coup. She wanted to strip me of the company, the accounts, the land, everything I had bled for over 50 years, all with the stroke of a pen, while her husband lay drooling 3 feet away. I cannot read it, baby, I stammered, my voice cracking. I left my reading glasses at the restaurant. The letters are all swimming. Nia let out a short, frustrated breath through her nose. You do not need to read it. Dad, it is standard. I read it. I am your daughter. I would not lie to you. Just sign it so we can get Chase the medicine he needs. Do you want him to die? That was the dagger, the guilt trip, the weapon she had used against me since she was 16. Do you want me to be me? Unhappy? Do you want me to fail? Do you want him to die? No, no, I mumbled, gripping the pen tighter. I do not want anyone to die. My hand shakes so much. Here, let me help you, she said, placing her hand over mine, guiding the pen to the line. Her hand was cold, clammy. She was desperate. She pressed down hard, forcing the nib onto the paper. Just write your name, Luther Banks, just like you always do. I felt the pressure of her hand. I felt the weight of the betrayal. I remembered teaching this girl to write her name in crayon at the kitchen table in our first apartment. I remembered her showing me her first cursive signature, so proud. Now she was guiding my hand to sign my own death warrant. I let her guide the movement. But at the last second I jerked my wrist. I did not write Luther Banks. I did not write the name that was on the buildings, on the trucks, on the checks. I wrote Betty, my wife, her mother, the woman who worked double shifts at the diner so I could buy my first rig, the woman who died of cancer while Nia was in college, a loss that nearly broke us both. I signed her name in a jagged, illegible scrawl. There, I whispered, dropping the pen. I did it. I saved him. Nia snatched the folder away before the ink was even dry. Thank God, she muttered, flipping the page to check the signature. I will take this to the admin office right now. And she froze. She stared at the signature. The silence in the room stretched, broken only by the rhythmic beeping of Chase's heart monitor and his low, delirious moans. Betty, she whispered. Her head snapped up, her eyes blazing with sudden, unmasked fury. What is this? Why did you write Betty? I looked at her, letting my mouth hang open slightly, blinking slowly. Betty? She handles the bills? I said, my voice drifting lost. She always handles the money. I have to ask Betty. Nia's face turned a color I had never seen before, a mix of purple rage and white-hot panic. She slammed the folder down on the side table, the sound cracking like a whip. Mom is dead, she screamed. She, forgetting the sleeping patients, forgetting the nurses, forgetting everything, but her failed plan. She has been dead for 10 years, you stupid old man. You ruined it. You ruined everything. She grabbed my shoulders and shook me. Her nails dug into my skin through my suit jacket. Sign it, again. Sign your name. Luther. Write, Luther. This was it. The mask was gone. There was no loving daughter here, just a predator who had missed her kill and was now starving. Nia, you are hurting me, I whimpered, shrinking back into the chair. Why are you yelling? Where is Betty? Shut up about Betty, she shrieked, raising her hand as if to strike me. You senile, useless fossil, sign the damn paper, or I swear to God I will help, I yelled, clutching my chest. I threw myself forward, sliding out of the chair and onto the cold linoleum floor. My heart, oh God, my heart. The reaction was instant. The door burst open. 2 nurses and a doctor rushed in. They saw me on the floor, clutching my chest, and Nia standing over me with her hand raised, her face twisted in rage. Code blue in room 304. No, wait, patient relative down, a nurse shouted. Get away from him, a male nurse barked, stepping between Nia and me. He grabbed her arm as she tried to reach for the folder. No, he is faking it, Nia screamed, trying to fight the nurse. He is lying. He is crazy. Give me the papers. I need him to sign the papers, Ma. You need to leave immediately, the doctor ordered, kneeling beside me to check my pulse. Security. Get her out of here. You do not understand, Nia yelled as 2 security guards appeared and grabbed her arms. She was kicking and screaming, a total breakdown. He did this on purpose. He is not sick. He is evil. He switched the glasses. He knows. He knows. They dragged her out. her heels scraping against the floor, her screams echoing down the hallway until the heavy doors swung shut, cutting off the noise. The room fell silent again. The doctor was listening to my heart with his stethoscope, his face serious. "Mr. Banks, can you hear me? Are you in?" Pain. I took a few shallow breaths, letting my heart rate slow down. I opened my eyes and looked at the doctor. I did not look confused anymore. I did not look senile. "I am fine, doctor," I said, my voice steady and cold, steel. "Just a panic attack. My daughter, she is under a lot of stress." The doctor looked at me, puzzled by the sudden change in demeanor. "Sir, your heart rate is elevated. We should run some tests." "No tests," I said, sitting up. I brushed off my suit jacket. "I need this room cleared. I need a private line, and I need you to make sure that woman does not come within 100 feet of this room again. Do you understand?" The doctor blinked, taken aback. "Sir, I own the company that delivers your medical supplies." "Son," I said, locking eyes with him, "do not make me call the hospital board. Clear the room." He nodded. Sensing the shift in power, he motioned for the nurses to leave. "I will be right outside if you need anything. Mr. Banks." When the door clicked shut, I was finally alone. Chase was still moaning, ill. In his restraints, lost in his chemical nightmare, I walked over to the side table and picked up the leather folder Nia had left behind in the struggle. I looked at the power of attorney form. I looked at the jagged Betty scrawled on the bottom. I ripped the paper in half, then in half again. I dropped the pieces into the biohazard bin. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I dialed a number I had not called in years, not for business but for war. "Cohen," I said, when the line clicked open. "It is Luther. Wake up. We have a situation." Nia just tried to force me to sign over the company in the emergency room. There was a pause on the other end, then the rustle of sheets. "Did you sign?" Cohen asked, his voice sharp. "I signed Betty's name," I said. Cohen let out a low, dry chuckle. "Old trucker trick. Buy yourself some time." "I do not need time." "Cohen, I need ammo," I said, looking at Chase, twitching form. "They are desperate. Nia is sloppy but Chase is in deep with someone you do not try to kill. Your cash cow. Unless you owe the butcher, find out who he owes, find out how much, and find out when it is due." "I am on it," Cohen said. "But Luther, if they tried this once, they will try again. You are not safe there." "I know," I said, looking at the empty doorway where my daughter had been dragged away screaming. "That is why I am not leaving. I am going to let them take me home. I am going into the belly of the beast." "That is suicide," Cohen warned. "No," I said, watching the heart monitor. "Trace the rhythm of a man who should be dead. It is a Trojan horse. They think I am a senile old man who got lucky. I am going to show them exactly who built this empire. Get me the financials, Cohen. I want to buy his debt. I want to own him." I hung up the phone. I walked over to the window and looked out at the Atlanta skyline. The city lights were blurring in the rain. My daughter wanted a war. She wanted my legacy. She was about to find out that the only thing I was signing over to her was a lesson in pain. I turned back to Chase, who was muttering something about spiders. "Sleep tight, son," I whispered. "Tomorrow the interest rate goes up." The lock on the door of the VIP hospital suite clicked shut with a heavy mechanical thud that echoed in the silence of the room. I dragged a chair over and wedged it under the handle just to be sure my heart was still hammering against my ribs. A frantic rhythm that had nothing to do with the fake heart attack and everything to do with the woman who had just tried to sign my life away. I walked to the window, looking out at the Atlanta skyline, blurred by the relentless rain. The city lights looked like smears of blood against the glass. I was alone, but I was not safe. Not yet. I pulled my burner phone from the inside pocket of my jacket. The one Nia didn't know about, the one I used for business deals that required no paper trails. I dialed a number I had memorized 40 years ago, back when we were both just hungry kids, trying to scrape a living out of the mud. Cohen picked up on the first. "Ring, I need you here now," I said, my voice low and rough. "Bring the black briefcase and use the service elevator. Do not let anyone see you." 20 minutes later, there was a rhythmic knock on the door. 3, fast, 2, slow. I moved the chair and opened it. Cohen slipped inside, shaking the rain off his trench coat. He looked like he always did, a tired beagle in a $3,000 suit. His eyes were sharp, though sharper than a razor. He scanned the room, then looked at me, checking for injuries, checking for the man he had known since we were hauling scrap metal in a beat-up Ford. "You look like hell." Luther, he said, locking the door behind him and tossing his briefcase onto the bed. Tell me it isn't true. Tell me. Nia didn't actually try it. I poured him a glass of water from the pitcher on the bedside table. My hands were steady now, the cold rage having frozen the tremors. She tried to make me sign a power of attorney while her husband was strapped to a bed, hallucinating about snakes. I said she thought I was senile. She thought I was broken. I signed Betty S. Named Cohen let out a low whistle, shaking his head. He sat down on the edge of the bed and opened the briefcase. It was packed with files, color-coded and thick, with the kind of secrets that destroy families. I asked you to dig. Cohen, what did you find? Why are they so desperate? Why now? Cohen pulled out a thick red folder and handed it to me. His face was grim, the kind of look a doctor gives you before telling you how long you have left. It is Chase, he said quietly. Your son-in-law isn't just a bad investor. Luther, he is a dead man, walking. I opened the file, my eyes scanning the numbers, the bank statements, the surveillance photos taken by Cohen's private investigators. It was worse than I thought. Much worse. Chase Miller, the man who wore Italian loafers and drank my scotch. Like water, was drowning in debt. But it wasn't credit card debt. It wasn't a mortgage. He hadn't borrowed from a bank. He had borrowed from the Ivanov syndicate. My blood ran cold. I knew the name. The Ivanovs were Eastern European heavyweights operating out of a warehouse district in South Atlanta. They didn't sue you when you missed a payment. They didn't send collection letters. They sent men with hammers and blowtorches. How much? I asked, looking up at Cohen. $5 million. Cohen said, his voice flat. He borrowed it 6 months ago to cover his losses in a crypto scheme that went bust. He told them he had insider information. He told them he was about to come into a massive windfall. He used your name, Luther. I slammed the folder shut, the sound cracking like a gunshot in the quiet room. He used my name. He showed them the preliminary buyout papers for banks. Trans Cohen explained. He told them he was the heir apparent. He told them that as soon as the deal closed, he would pay them back with interest, double the principal. And the deadline, I asked already knowing the answer. 48 hours, Cohen said, checking his watch. 2 days, Luther, if he doesn't. If he pay them $5 million plus the VIG by Friday night, they are going to kill him. And they are probably going to come for Nia too, just to make a point. I stood up and walked back to the window, staring at my reflection in the glass. I looked old tired, but my eyes were burning. This was it. This was the motive. This was why they needed the signature tonight. Why they needed me out of the way. They weren't just greedy, they were terrified. They were cornered rats biting the hand that fed them. So the poison wasn't just for the money, I muttered. It was for survival. If I die. Nia inherits. If Nia inherits, she pays the Russians and they get to keep playing house in the mansion. I bought them. Exactly. Cohen stood up, walking over to stand beside me. We have enough here to go to the police. Luther attempted murder, fraud, conspiracy, coupled with the debt to organized crime. The FBI would have a field day. We could put them both away for 20 years. Chase would be in protective custody before the sun comes up. I looked at Cohen, my friend, my brother, and I shook my head slowly. No. Police. Cohen frowned. Luther. They tried to kill you. That neurotoxin in the wine, that wasn't a joke, that was a weapon. I know what it was, I snapped, turning to face him. But if I call the police now, Chase goes to jail and he is safe. Nia plays the weeping wife, the victim of a controlling husband and a senile father. She walks away, maybe with probation, and I spend the rest of my life testifying in court while my business crumbles. Then what do you want to do? Cohen asked, exasperated. I want to buy it, I said. Cohen blinked, confused. Buy what? The debt, I said, pointing at the red folder. I want to buy the debt from the Ivanovs. Cohen's jaw dropped. Are you insane? Luther, you want to pay $5 million to the mob to save the man who tried to poison you? Save him. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. I don't want to save him. Cohen, I want to own him. I walked over to the bed and picked up the file again, flipping through the pages, until I found the contact information for the Ivanovs' front company, a legitimate logistics firm they used to launder their money. Set up a shell company. I said, my voice turning into the gravelly growl I used in boardroom negotiations. Call it Nemesis, Holdings or something vague. Use the offshore accounts in Panama, make an offer to the Ivanovs. Tell them we are purchasing the distressed asset. Tell them we will pay the principal in full cash immediately if they transfer the debt title to us." Cohen rubbed his forehead, pacing the room. "Luther, they are criminals. They want their double interest. They want their money back without a war," I corrected him. "If Chase defaults, they have to kill him, which brings heat. If they sell the debt to us, they get their $5 million clean and they walk away. They are businessmen. Cohen ruthless ones, but businessmen offer them $5.5 million for the note, cash wire transfer within the hour." Cohen stopped pacing. He looked at me, and I saw the realization dawn. In his eyes, he understood what I was doing. If I owned the debt, I owned Chase. I became the reaper. I became the one holding the hammer. "And once we own it," Cohen asked quietly, "once we own it, we call the note due." I said, cold as ice immediately. "We enforce the terms 48 hours, or we take everything. Not just the money, his dignity, his freedom, his marriage. I want him to know that the man he tried to kill is the man holding the leash." Cohen stared at me for a long moment. Then he nodded, a slow, grim nod. "Okay, Luther. I will make the call. I can have the shell company set up and the wire ready in 30 minutes. But you know what this means. You are stepping into the mud with them." "I was born in the mud, Cohen," I said. "I just bought a nice suit to cover it up." "Make the call." Cohen pulled out his phone and stepped into the bathroom to make the arrangements. I sat back down in the chair, feeling the adrenaline coursing through me. It was a dangerous game, a deadly game, but it was the only way to make sure they learned the lesson. I wasn't just going to defeat them, I was going to dismantle them piece by piece. My burner phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting an update from the security team at my estate. Instead, it was a text from a number I didn't have saved, but I knew who it was. "Jamal," I opened the message and read it twice, just to be sure. "Mr. Banks, they are in the parking lot back at Lamond. I am on my break in the alley. I see them. They have a locksmith with them. They are breaking into your Bentley. They are tearing it apart, looking for something." I stared at the screen, a small smile touching my lips. Of course they were looking for the evidence. They were looking for the vial of toxin, for the ring, maybe even for my real phone. They thought if they could scrub the scene, they could rewrite the story. "Let them look," I whispered to the empty room. I typed a quick reply to Jamal. "Do not interfere. Take pictures if you can stay safe. Bonus coming." I put the phone away just as Cohen came back out of the bathroom. He looked pale but resolute. "It is done," he said. "The Ivanovs accepted the offer. The wire is being processed. Nemesis Holdings now owns the debt of Chase Miller in the amount of $5 million due in 47 hours. "Good," I said, standing up and buttoning my jacket. I felt stronger, sharper. The old trucker was back behind the wheel, and I had a heavy load to deliver. "Now get me out of here, Cohen," I said, grabbing my cane. "I need to go home." "Home?" Cohen asked, looking at me like I had a death wish. "You mean to your estate?" "No," I said, walking to the door and removing the chair from under the handle. "I mean to their house," Nia said. "She wanted to take care of me. She said she wanted me close, so I am going to give her what she wants. I am moving in." Cohen grabbed my arm. "Luther, that is a house of wolves. They will try again." "Let them try," I said, opening the door and stepping into the hallway. The hospital lights were bright, harsh, and revealing. I am not the prey anymore, Cohen. I am the hunter, and I want to be there when they realize the trap has snapped shut. I walked down the hallway, the sound of my cane tapping a steady rhythm on the floor. I was going into the belly of the beast. I was going to sleep under the same roof as the daughter who betrayed me and the son-in-law who sold me out. And I was going to smile and eat their food and play the part of the foolish old man until the exact moment I decided to burn it all down. "Get the car around." I told Cohen we have a family reunion to attend. As we headed for the elevator, I checked my watch. 47 hours, the countdown had begun, and for Chase Miller, time was already running out. The wheelchair wheels squeaked against the polished linoleum of the hospital lobby, a high-pitched rhythm that grated on my last nerve. Nia was pushing me way too fast, like she was trying to break a land speed record for getting an old man into a hearse. She had that determined look on her face, the one she used to get when she wanted a pony or a convertible or a husband who didn't work. "Daddy, you are going to be so much more comfortable at our place," she chirped loud enough for the nurses at the desk to hear. "The big house is too empty for you right now, especially with your memory issues. We have the guest suite all ready. It is right on the first floor, so you won't have to deal with stairs." I gripped the armrests of the chair, suppressing the urge to tell her I could still climb the side of a rig faster than her husband could climb out of bed. Memory issues, I thought bitterly. The only thing wrong with my memory was that I remembered too much. I remembered changing her diapers. I remembered paying her tuition, and I remembered the look on her face when she watched me drink that wine. I didn't argue. I let her bundle me into her Range Rover, the one I paid for 3 Christmases ago, and played the part of the exhausted, confused patriarch. "Fine, baby girl," I mumbled, letting my head loll against the headrest. "Whatever you say, just don't let me be alone." She patted my knee with a hand that felt cold even through my trousers. "Don't worry, Daddy. We are going to take really good care of you." The drive to their estate in Buckhead took 30 minutes. 30 minutes of Nia talking on her Bluetooth, pretending to handle business calls that I knew were fake. She was trying to sound important, trying to sound like the CEO she wanted to replace me as. But I wasn't listening to her chatter. I was looking out the window, watching the city pass by and thinking about the house we were driving to. I bought that mansion for them 5 years ago, paid cash, $2.5 million a wedding gift. I thought it would give them a fresh start, a foundation to build a family. Instead, Cohen's report told me they had treated it like a piggy bank. They had mortgaged it 3 times. Pulling out every cent of equity to fund Chase's gambling and Nia's shopping addiction. The house wasn't an asset anymore. It was a hollow shell owned by the bank, just like their marriage. When we pulled into the driveway, the house looked impressive. Massive white columns, perfectly manicured lawn, a monument to excess. But I knew the truth. It was a house of cards waiting for a stiff breeze getting out of the car. I leaned heavily on my cane, shuffling my feet. Nia grabbed my elbow, guiding me like I was a toddler. "Watch your step, Daddy, almost there." She opened the double front doors and the smell hit me. First, it wasn't the smell of home cooking or warmth. It smelled of expensive candles trying to cover up something stale like old cigarettes and desperation. We walked into the foyer, and that is when I stopped dead in my tracks. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from exertion but from pure, unadulterated rage. Hanging right there in the hallway, illuminated by a $10,000 chandelier, was the drummer. It was a painting. An original oil on canvas by a renowned Harlem Renaissance artist. I had bought it 20 years ago for Betty. Our anniversary present. She loved that painting. She said it reminded her of the rhythm of our life. Last month, my warehouse manager told me it had vanished during an inventory check stolen. He said probably an inside job. It was an inside job, all right. It was hanging on my daughter's wall, framed in gaudy gold leaf like a trophy. I stared at it, my knuckles turning white on the head of my cane. "Daddy, what is it?" Nia asked, following my gaze, panic flickering in her eyes for a split second before she masked it. "Oh, that pretty picture. I found a print that looked just like the one you used to have. Isn't it nice? I thought it would make you feel at home." A print. She was lying to my face, insulting my intelligence, and desecrating her mother's memory all in one breath. That painting was worth $200,000, and she had stolen it from her own father's warehouse, likely planning to sell it on the black market once I was out of the way. "That is nice, baby," I said, my voice thick with feigned senility. "Betty liked that one. It looks real. It is just a copy." "Daddy, come on, let us get you settled." She pulled me away physically, dragging me from the evidence of her crime. She led me down the hall, past the living room where I saw more of my missing items. A Ming vase on the mantel, a sculpture in the corner. They had been stripping me bare for months right under my nose. She opened the door to the guest room and my stomach turned. It wasn't a suite. It was a storage room converted into a cell. There were boxes stacked in the corner, a single twin bed with a thin blanket, and a window that looked out onto the brick wall of the garage. It was dark, damp, and smelled of mildew. This was where they put the garbage. This was where they put the old man they wanted to forget. "Here we are. Cozy, right?" Nia said, beaming. "I put some of your things on the nightstand. Rest now." "Daddy?" "Chase is back from the hospital, too. He is resting upstairs. I will bring you some soup later." She practically pushed me onto the bed and backed out of the room, closing the door with a definitive click. I heard the lock turn from the outside, just a soft metallic sound, but it echoed like a prison gate. She had locked me in my own house that I bought with my own sweat. I sat on the edge of the lumpy mattress and let the mask drop. My face hardened into stone. I wasn't confused. I wasn't frail. I was a man assessing his enemy as fortifications. I looked around the room, scanning for threats under the bed. I found a small plastic bottle kicked hastily out of sight. I picked it up. It had no label, just a clear liquid inside. I uncapped it and sniffed acrid chemical illegal hallucinogens, the kind they use in clubs to spike drinks, Plan B. I thought they were going to drug me, keep me pliable, keep me crazy. I capped the bottle and slid it into my pocket, evidence ammunition. I sat back and pulled the small receiver for the bug out of my jacket pocket. I put the earpiece in and turned up the volume static at first, then the sound of a door closing upstairs, then voices crystal clear. I heard Chase's voice. He sounded rough, his throat raw from the pumping at the hospital, but he was lucid and he was angry. "Did you lock him in?" he rasped. "Yes, he is in the back room. He thinks it is a guest suite. He is totally out of it, Chase." He stared at that painting for a minute and didn't even realize it was the real one. He is gone. His brain is mush. "Do not underestimate him, Nia," Chase snapped. I heard the sound of glass hitting a table, ice clinking. "He is a tough old bastard. The poison should have killed him, but he is still walking around. We missed our shot. So what do we do now?" The bank called again. They are threatening to foreclose next week if we don't make a payment, and the Ivanovs, Chase, they are not going to wait. I leaned forward, listening intently. This was it, the confirmation. "Screw the poison," Chase hissed. "Plan A is dead. It is too risky now with the police involved. We go to Plan B immediately." "What is Plan B?" Nia asked, her voice trembling. "Incapacity," Chase said, the word landing with a heavy thud. "We don't need him dead, we just need him declared mentally incompetent. We have him in the house, we control his food, his meds, his environment. Look at him, he is seeing things, he is forgetting names. We get a doctor. Dr. Evans owes me a favor to sign an affidavit stating Luther Banks is suffering from advanced dementia and is a danger to himself." And then Nia asked, "And then I get power of attorney, I become his legal guardian, I liquidate the assets to pay for his care. And by care, I mean paying off the Russians and saving this house. We put him in a state facility somewhere cheap, somewhere they don't ask questions, and we take it all, the company, the accounts, the real estate, everything." There was a silence on the line. Then Nia spoke, her voice soft, chillingly calm. "He trusts me. He thinks I am taking care of him. I can make sure he takes the meds, the special ones, the ones that make him see spiders. He won't even know what hit him." "Exactly," Chase said. "Do it tonight. Start the heavy dose with his soup by morning. He won't know his own name by Friday. We will own the empire." I took the earpiece out, my hand shaking not from age but from the sheer violence of their betrayal. They were not just going to kill me. They were going to erase me. They were going to turn Luther Banks, the man who built a legacy, into a drooling vegetable in a state ward so they could keep their country club membership. I looked at the door, the locked door. I looked at the bottle of hallucinogens in my pocket, and I looked at the thin blanket on the bed. They wanted a crazy old man. I would give them one, but I wouldn't be the victim of their hallucination. I would be the architect of their nightmare. I stood up and walked to the window, peering through the blinds. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the estate I bought with blood and tears. Tonight I was in the lion's den. But lions don't know how to deal with a trucker who knows how to handle a tire iron. I sat back down and waited for the soup. Let them come, let them bring their poison. I was hungry, but not for food. I was hungry for the look on their faces when the check came due. Nia came into the guest room carrying a silver tray with a porcelain bowl of tomato soup steaming on it. She had a smile plastered on her face that did not reach her eyes. It was the kind of smile a shark gives you right before it takes a leg. She set the tray down on the nightstand, moving my reading glasses to the side with a little too much force. "Here you go, Daddy," she said, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness that made my teeth ache. "I made this from scratch just for you. You need to keep your strength up, especially with how confused you have been lately. I put your blood pressure medicine on the side. Make sure you take it before you eat." I looked at the little plastic cup next to the spoon. Inside were 2 small blue pills. They were round and smooth, and they looked absolutely nothing like the white oval lisinopril tablets I had been taking for 15 years. She was not even trying hard. She thought I was so far gone that I would not know the difference between a heart pill and a heavy-duty sedative. She was treating me like an idiot, and that was her first mistake. "Thank you, baby girl," I said, my voice trembling just enough to sell the act. I reached out with a shaking hand and picked up the cup. I brought it to my lips, my other hand fumbling for the water glass. Nia watched me like a hawk. Her eyes locked on those blue pills, waiting for me to swallow her ticket to freedom. I took a sip of water and tossed the pills into my mouth, but I did not swallow. I tucked them under my tongue, a trick I learned back in the 70s when I was driving cross-country and had to pretend to take stay-awake pills to get the dispatchers off my back. I gulped loud and hard, making a show of it. "Good girl," Nia said, patting my head like I was a golden retriever. Now eat your soup. I will be back for the tray in an hour. She turned and walked out, locking the door behind her. The click of the deadbolt was getting to be a familiar sound. As soon as she was gone, I spit the pills into my hand. I crushed them between my thumb and forefinger. They turned into a fine blue powder. I sniffed it. No smell, just chemical bitterness. These were strong. Likely the same stuff she planned to use to make me see spiders. Later, I wrapped the powder in a tissue and slid it into my pocket. I was not going to take their poison, but I knew exactly who was. I ate half the soup just to make it look convincing. Then I lay back and waited. The night passed in a blur of vigilance. I slept in 20-minute bursts, keeping one eye open, waiting for the next attack. But the attack did not come in the form of violence. It came in the form of madness. When the sun came up, I reached for my cane, which I always leaned against the nightstand. It was gone. I frowned, sitting up, my joints popping. I looked around the room. The chair that had been in the corner was now in front of the window, the picture of Betty. I kept in my wallet on the table was face down. My shoes were tied together by the laces. The door unlocked and Nia breezed in carrying a cup of coffee. Morning, Daddy. How did you sleep? Did the medicine help? Where is my cane, Nia? I asked, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. She looked at me, her face a mask of confusion. Daddy, you left it in the kitchen last night, remember? You walked in there at 3 a.m. screaming about the fire alarm going off, don't you remember? I stared at her. She was good. I had not left the room, the door was locked, I had not screamed, but she said it with such conviction, such pity, that for a split second, just a fraction of a heartbeat, I questioned myself. That is what gaslighting does. It makes you doubt the ground you stand on. No, Nia, I said slowly. I did not leave this room you locked me in. She sighed, shaking her head, looking at an imaginary audience. Daddy, we do not lock the doors. You are imagining things again, just like the painting yesterday. This is getting worse. We might need to call Dr. Evans sooner than I thought. She walked over to the dresser and picked up my watch. Why did you put your watch in the flower vase, Daddy? You are going to ruin it. I watched her pull my Rolex out of a vase of dead flowers, water dripping from the band I had not put it there. She had come in while I was dozing and moved it. She was staging a scene, creating evidence of a mind in decay. I am sorry, baby, I muttered, playing along, looking down at my hands. I must be getting worse. Yes, you are, she said, her voice hard. But we will take care of you now. Come on, breakfast is ready. Chase is waiting. I shuffled into the kitchen, leaning on the wall since my cane was supposedly lost. Chase was sitting at the island reading the Wall Street Journal, wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than my first truck. At his feet sat Pierre, his prize standard poodle. Pierre was a nervous, high-strung animal with a haircut that made him look ridiculous. He was Chase S., pride and joy, a status symbol that barked. Morning, Luther, Chase said, not looking up from his paper. Nia tells me you had a rough night wandering around shouting nonsense. We cannot have that, Luther. We have neighbors. We have a reputation. I did not answer. I sat down at the table, keeping my head low under the table. My hand found the tissue in my pocket with the crushed blue powder inside. I looked at Pierre. The dog was whining, scratching at his expensive ceramic bowl, waiting for his morning wet food. Chase stood up to pour himself more coffee, leaving his plate of eggs. Benedict and the dog's food preparation station unguarded for 10 seconds. Nia was busy at the sink washing her hands. It was the only window I would get. I dropped my napkin intentionally, bending down to retrieve it. As I did, my hand moved with lightning speed. I dumped the blue powder into the center of Pierre's gourmet wet food mixture and stirred it in with my finger, wiping the residue on the napkin as I came back up. Here, boy, I whispered, nudging the bowl toward the dog with my foot. Pierre dove in, wolfing down the food like he had not eaten in a week. I watched him lick the bowl clean, swallowing every grain of the sedative that was meant to turn my brain into mush. Chase sat back down, unaware that his precious dog had just become a biological time bomb. So Luther, he said, cutting his eggs, we are going to have that doctor come by this afternoon just for a checkup. Nothing to worry about. Just a formality for the insurance. I nodded, chewing on a piece of dry toast. Sure, Chase, whatever you say. 20 minutes later, we were all in the living room. Chase was lounging on his new Italian leather sofa, a white monstrosity he had been bragging about since I arrived. $20,000 imported from Milan, hand-stitched softer than butter. He was on his phone, probably checking gambling odds or texting his mistress. Pierre started to pace. He was whining, a low, high-pitched sound. He spun in circles, chasing his tail, his claws clicking frantically on the hardwood floor. The drugs were hitting him, but they were not making him sleepy. In some dogs, sedatives can cause a paradoxical reaction, hyperarousal aggression, mania. Pierre was tripping, and he was having a bad trip. "What is wrong with that damn dog?" Chase muttered. "Kicking out a foot, stay still, Pierre." Pierre stopped. He looked at Chase with eyes that were dilated and wild. He let out a bark that sounded more like a scream, and then he launched himself. He did not attack Chase. He attacked the sofa. It was like watching a land shark. Pierre dug his claws into the pristine white leather and tore it open. The sound was like a zipper being ripped from a dress. Foam flew into the air. Chase screamed, dropping his phone. "Hey, get off, stop it!" But Pierre was gone. He was in a frenzy. He bit into the cushion, shaking his head violently, ripping out huge chunks of stuffing. He peed right there on the seat, a dark yellow stain spreading rapidly across the $20,000 leather. He was growling, snapping at the air, fighting invisible enemies. Nia came running in from the hallway. "Oh my God, Pierre, what is wrong with him? He is crazy!" Chase yelled, trying to grab the dog's collar. Pierre snapped at him, his teeth clicking inches from Chase's hand. Chase recoiled, falling backward over the coffee table, landing hard on his back. The dog jumped onto Chase's chest, using him as a springboard to launch himself back at the sofa. He tore into the headrest, shredding it to ribbons in seconds. The room was filled with flying foam, barking, and the screams of my daughter and her husband. It was chaos. Absolute, beautiful chaos. I sat in my armchair in the corner, perfectly still, my face a mask of bewildered innocence. Inside, I was laughing so hard, my ribs hurt. Chase managed to scramble to his feet, his silk robe torn his hair wild. "Do something." "Nia, call the vet. He is having a seizure or something. Look at my couch, my Italian couch. It is ruined." Pierre was currently humping a throw pillow, while simultaneously chewing on the armrest, froth dripping from his mouth. He looked like a demon-possessed cotton ball. I leaned forward, clutching the arm of my chair, looking at Chase with wide, fearful eyes. "He hates it," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. Chase spun around, glaring at me. "What? What did you say, old man?" I pointed a shaking finger at the dog, who was now vomiting the blue-tinted breakfast onto the rug right next to Chase's bare feet. "The dog," I said innocently. "He told me earlier he hates that cheap cologne you wear, Chase. He says it smells like desperation." Chase's face went purple. He looked ready to stroke out. He looked from me to the ruined sofa to the heaving dog. Getting the smell of cheap cologne and dog vomit out of a $20,000 investment was going to be impossible. "Get him out of here," Chase roared at Nia. "Get the dog outside before I kill it." Nia grabbed Pierre by the collar, struggling as the dog thrashed and snapped, dragging him toward the patio door. She looked at me, her eyes narrowed, suspicious, but she couldn't prove a thing. She had locked the meds away. She had the key. I was just a confused old man watching the world burn. As the door slammed shut, leaving Chase standing in the wreckage of his living room, I leaned back and closed my eyes. The gaslighting game had 2 players now, and I had just taken the first round. That sofa was just the beginning. By the time I was done with them, they wouldn't have a chair to sit on, let alone a mansion to hide in. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Nia and Chase's dining room, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air and the fresh scratches on the hardwood floor where the dog had gone berserk the night before. The expensive Italian sofa was gone, hauled away by a confused cleaning crew, leaving a gaping empty space in the living room that felt like a missing tooth. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that hangs heavy before a storm breaks. I sat at the head of the long mahogany table, my hands resting on the cool wood, wishing I had my cane just to have something to grip. Nia placed a plate of eggs and toast in front of me, her movements jerky and nervous. She was wearing a silk blouse and pearls, dressed for an audience. She kept glancing at the front door, checking her watch, checking her phone. She was vibrating with anticipation. "Eat up, Daddy," she said, her voice tight. "We have a guest coming this morning. A friend of Chase's, a doctor, just to check on you, too. Make sure you are adjusting, okay?" I looked at the eggs. They were cold. I looked at Nia. Her eyes were hard, devoid of the warmth a daughter should have. She was not checking on me. She was setting the stage. I picked up my fork and played with the food, my hand trembling intentionally, spilling a few crumbs onto the placemat. Let them think I was falling apart. Let them think the engine was blown and the wheels were coming off. The doorbell rang and Chase practically ran to answer it. He was wearing a fresh suit, trying to look like the master of the house, but I could see the dark circles under his eyes. He had not slept. He was terrified of the Ivanovs. He was terrified of the debt, and he was terrified of me, even if he wouldn't admit it. He walked back into the dining room, followed by a man who looked less like a doctor and more like a used car salesman in a lab coat. He was short, balding, with a sheen of sweat on his upper lip, carrying a leather briefcase that looked brand new. "Luther, this is Dr. This is Evans," Chase announced, gesturing grandly. "Dr. Evans is a renowned neurologist. He agreed to make a house call as a favor to me. Isn't that nice?" Dr. Evans stepped forward, extending a clammy hand. "Mr. Banks, a pleasure to meet you. I understand you have been having some cognitive episodes, some confusion regarding time and place, memory lapses." I stared at his hand but did not shake it. I let my jaw go slack, my eyes unfocused, looking just past his ear. "Who are you?" I mumbled, slurring my words slightly. "Are you the mechanic? Is the truck ready?" Chase let out a short, performative sigh. "See, doctor, this is what we are dealing with. He does not even know where he is. He thinks he is back at the depot in the 80s. Nia was already standing by the sideboard, her phone held up vertically, the red recording light blinking. She was framing the shot, making sure to catch my confusion, making sure to catch the doctor's concern. This was their audition tape for the judge. This was the evidence they needed to strip me of my rights. Dr. Evans pulled a chair close to mine, clicking a pen. "Sit down. Mr. Banks, let us just have a little chat. Nothing to worry about. Just some standard questions to establish a baseline." He opened a file, acting important. "Acting official. Can you tell me your full name and date of birth?" I looked at Nia, then at the camera lens. I blinked slowly. "Luther," I said, dragging out the syllables. "Luther James Banks, born 1940. "Okay, good. Dr. Evans wrote something down, and can you tell me who the current president of the United States is?" I furrowed my brow, putting on a show of deep concentration, scratching my chin with a shaking hand. "It is Eisenhower, right?" I said, looking hopeful. "I voted for him." "Good man, built the highways." Chase shook his head, offering a sad look to the camera. "See that? Honey, he is getting worse. He is stuck in the past." Dr. Evans made a tisk sound, shaking his head theatrically. "Incorrect, Mr. Banks. But that is okay. Let us try another one. What year is it right now today?" I looked out the window at the modern cars in the driveway, at the skyline of Atlanta rising in the distance. I looked back at the doctor with wide, innocent eyes. "It is 1972, I said firmly. "I have a delivery to make in Birmingham tomorrow. The union is striking. I have to cross the line." Nia let out a small sob, a perfect little sound of heartbreak. "Oh, Daddy," she whispered for the benefit of the recording. "It breaks my heart to see him like this." Dr. Evans nodded, grave and serious, profound temporal disorientation, distinct, regression to earlier occupational memories, typical presentation of advanced dementia or Alzheimer. He looked at Chase, giving him a subtle nod, the signal that they had what they needed. Chase's shoulders relaxed, a grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. He walked behind the doctor, leaning against the wall, crossing his arms. He felt like he had won. He felt like the $300 million was already in his pocket. "Just one more area to cover," Dr. Evans said, flipping a page in his notebook. "Given your condition. Mr. Banks, it is clear you are having trouble with daily tasks. Tell me about your finances. Do you handle your own bills? Do you know where your money is?" This was the money shot. Literally, they needed me to say on camera that I was confused about my assets, that I didn't know what I owned, so they could step in as my legal guardians. I leaned back in my chair, letting my mouth hang open a little. "Money," I mumbled, looking at the ceiling. "Betty handles the money. She keeps it in the coffee tin under the sink. I don't know about banks. Banks are for thieves." Chase chuckled, a cruel sound. "Yes, Luther, banks are for thieves. That is why we need to protect you. Tell the doctor. Do you even know how much your company is worth? Do you know about your accounts?" I stayed silent, looking down at my cold eggs, letting the silence stretch, letting them think I was processing the question through a fog of senility. Nia moved closer, zooming in on my face, waiting for the final nail in the coffin. Dr. Evans leaned in, invading my personal space. "Mr. Banks, if you cannot manage your assets, the court will need to appoint someone responsible, someone like your daughter and son-in-law. Do you understand that you are not capable, are you?" I looked up slowly. The tremor in my hands stopped. The slackness in my jaw tightened. My eyes, which had been cloudy and distant, snapped into focus, locking onto the doctor's face with the intensity of high beams cutting through a dark highway. I straightened my spine, sitting up to my full height in the chair. The transformation was instant and terrifying. "I am perfectly capable, doctor," I said, my voice dropping an octave, losing the slur, gaining the gravel and steel of the man who built an empire, capable enough to know that your medical license was suspended in 2012 for insurance fraud and reinstated only after a very expensive settlement, capable enough to know you are not here for my health. You are here for a payout. The room froze. Dr. Evans recoiled as if I had slapped him, his pen dropping from his hand onto the table. Nia gasped the phone in her hand, shaking so bad the video must have been a blur. Chase pushed himself off the wall, his smug grin vanishing, replaced by the pale look of a man who just heard the click of a landmine. "What?" Chase stammered. "What did you say?" I turned my gaze to him, ignoring the doctor, ignoring Nia. I looked right at Chase Miller, the man who wore my suits and spent my money and tried to end my life. I said, "I am capable. Chase. Capable enough to know about the Cayman Islands. Capable enough to know about account number 7, 49221-B at the Cayman National Bank, under the shell, name Miller Ventures." Chase's face went the color of old ash. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. I continued, my voice relentless, pounding him like a jackhammer. "I know you opened it 18 months ago. I know you have been siphoning maintenance funds from the fleet budget to deposit there. I know the current balance is $2.3 million stolen from the company you claim to be saving." Nia lowered the phone, her eyes wide, staring at her husband, Chase. "You have a secret account. You stole $2 million. Chase ignored her. His eyes were locked on mine. Terrified, he looked like he was going to be sick. "I know about the transfers. Chase," I said, leaning forward, my voice low and dangerous. "I know about the withdrawal you made last week to pay off your gambling debt to the track in Macon. I know you didn't pay the Ivanovs. I know you are hoarding cash to run." Dr. Evans stood up, scrambling to gather his papers, his face red, his hands shaking worse than mine had been pretending to. He looked from me to Chase, realizing he had walked into a crossfire. He wasn't paid enough for realizing he was now a witness to a felony confession. "I think I should go," the doctor stammered, backing away toward the door. This seems like a family matter. I cannot get involved in this." "No, wait," Chase yelled, panic in his voice. "Don't listen to him, Evans. He is crazy. He is making it up. It is part of the dementia. He is paranoid." I laughed, a dry, harsh sound that echoed in the dining room. "Paranoid, son." I recited the routing number 004492211. I recited the SWIFT code CAYMKY for the Georgetown branch. "Do you want me to tell you the password too? Or is that enough for the doctor?" Dr. Evans didn't wait. He turned and practically ran for the front door, his footsteps echoing on the tile. The front door slammed shut, leaving us in a silence that was heavy and suffocating. Nia turned the camera off her hand, dropping to her side. She looked at Chase, and I saw the doubt creeping in. She was greedy and she was ruthless, but she had not known about the Cayman account. She had not known he was stealing from the pot before they even secured it. "Is it true?" she whispered. "Chase, do you have an account?" Chase ran a hand through his hair, pulling at it, looking wild, looking cornered. "Shut up, Nia." He snapped, his voice high and tight. "He is lying. He hacked my computer or something. He is trying to divide us. Don't you see that is his game?" I picked up my fork and stabbed a piece of cold toast, bringing it to my mouth and taking a calm, deliberate bite. I chewed slowly, watching them implode. "No game, Chase," I said, swallowing the toast dry. "Game over. You brought a fake doctor into my house to call me crazy, and I just gave him the most lucid financial audit of his life. Do you think he is going to sign that affidavit now? Do you think he is going to risk perjury when I can recite your offshore routing numbers from memory?" Chase looked at the empty doorway where his salvation had just fled. Then he looked back at me. hatred burning in his eyes, pure, unadulterated hatred. "Get out," he whispered. "Get out of my house, old man." I smiled, a cold predator. Smile. I picked up my napkin and wiped my mouth, dropping it onto the plate. "It isn't your house, son," I said. Standing up without the cane, I didn't need it anymore. The adrenaline was holding me up just fine. It is the Bank S house, and I think I will stay right here. I want to see what happens when the Ivanovs find out you have $2 million sitting in the Caribbean that you didn't give them. I turned and walked out of the dining room, leaving them standing in the wreckage of their breakfast, leaving Chase to explain why he was hiding a fortune from his wife, and leaving Nia to wonder if she was the partner in this crime or just another victim. I walked down the hall toward the guest room, humming a little tune under my breath. They wanted a show. I gave them a show, but the second act was just getting started, and I had a feeling it was going to be a bloodbath. The shouting match upstairs had been raging for an hour, a rhythmic thumping of accusations and breaking glass that shook the ceiling of my guest room prison. Nia was screaming about the Cayman account, about the lies, about how she looked like a fool in front of the fake doctor. Chase was screaming back, his voice cracking with the desperate vibrato of a man watching the water rise around his neck, blaming me, blaming the stress, blaming everyone but himself. I lay on the twin bed, my hands folded over my chest, staring at the water stains on the ceiling, waiting, listening not with the ears of a father, but with the ears of a predator, waiting for the herd to scatter. Eventually, the shouting died down, followed by the slam of a door, Chase's heavy footsteps stomping down the hall into his home office, then silence. He was going to ground. He was going to his sanctuary to assess the damage, to check his accounts, to plan his next move. I checked my watch. It was 2 p.m, the perfect time for an old man to take a nap, the perfect time for the house to let its guard down. I waited another 30 minutes, giving Chase enough time to drink whatever scotch he was pouring and spiral into his own panic. Then I heard it, the click of the office door opening and his footsteps heading toward the master bedroom, likely to try and smooth things over with Nia, or maybe just to pass out. I sat up, my joints popping a symphony of old age that I usually tried to hide, but today I welcomed the stiffness. It reminded me I was real. I was solid. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the USB drive Jamal had pressed into my hand days ago. He called it a keystroke logger, said it would record everything typed on a keyboard and take screenshots every 5 seconds. I did not understand the code, but I understood the application. It was a wiretap for the digital age. I grabbed my cane, not for walking, but for a weapon if I needed it, and opened my door silently. I crept down the hallway, moving with the rolling gait I had perfected over 40 years of walking on gravel lots and slick loading docks. The house was quiet, the air thick with the tension of the fight upstairs. The door to Chase S' office was ajar, just a crack. I pushed it open with the tip of my cane and slipped inside. The room smelled of stale cigar smoke and expensive leather, a shrine to a man who had accomplished nothing. The desk was a massive slab of mahogany cluttered with papers, unopened bills, and a state-of-the-art computer humming with a soft blue light. I moved around the desk, my heart hammering a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. The screen was dark, asleep. I touched the mouse and the monitor flared to life, demanding a password. I smiled, a cold, humorless thing. Chase was arrogant, he was lazy, and he was predictable. He wouldn't use a complex string of characters. He would use something that made him feel big. I typed in MILLIONS, enter incorrect. I tried BANKS, enter incorrect. I paused. Thinking like a man who was drowning in debt but dreaming of a throne, I typed LEGACY, enter the screen, unlocked. I didn't have much time. I plugged the USB drive into the back of the tower, waiting for the little green light to flash, just like Jamal said it would, while the software did its work, silently sucking the secrets out of the machine. I started clicking. I wasn't looking for spreadsheets. I was looking for the exit strategy. I opened his email, nothing but overdue notices and spam. I opened his browser history, nothing but gambling sites and luxury car listings. Then I saw it, a minimized window at the bottom of the screen, a secure messaging app, encrypted private, the kind criminals and cheaters use. I clicked it, and the window expanded, revealing a conversation thread that had been active just 10 minutes ago. The contact name was simply V. I scrolled up reading the messages, and as I read, the blood in my veins turned to ice. It wasn't the cold of fear, it was the absolute zero of total comprehension. Message from Chase, baby. Hold on, the old man is proving difficult. He knows about the account, but he can't access it. I need 2 more days. Message from V. Chase, you promised the lease on the villa in Rio is waiting. If we don't pay by Friday, we lose it. What about the tickets? Message from Chase. I have the tickets. We leave Saturday morning. First flight out of Hartsfield Jackson, just you, me, and Toby. Once I get the signature, I wire the $300 million to the crypto wallet, and we vanish. Let Nia deal with the fallout. Let her deal with the Russians. She is the heir. She inherits the debt. I stopped breathing, my hand hovering over the mouse Toby, who was Toby. I scrolled up further, looking for images, searching for the face of the enemy. And there it was, a photo sent 3 days ago. A picture of a woman, young blonde, beautiful in a plastic way, standing on the lawn of a modest house in the suburbs, holding a toddler on her hip, a little boy with sandy hair and Chase-S eyes. Caption, my 2 loves, see you soon, Daddy. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. Chase didn't just have a mistress, he had a whole other life. He had a son, a 3-year-old boy. He was hiding in Sandy Springs while he played house with my daughter. He wasn't just stealing my money to pay debts, he was stealing my legacy to build a new one with someone else. I read the next message from Chase. Do not worry about Nia. She is useful, but she is an idiot. She actually thinks I love her. She thinks we are partners once the old man kicks the bucket or gets locked up. I am gone. She can have the house, and the Ivanovs will probably break her legs looking for the money, better her than us. I stared at the words glowing on the screen, burning them into my retinas. She is an idiot, better her than us. I felt a wave of nausea roll over me. Not for myself, but for Nia. My daughter, my flesh and blood. She was greedy. Yes, she was entitled. She had tried to poison me, but she was doing it because she thought she was saving her marriage. She thought she was fighting for her future. She didn't know she was just the getaway driver for a bank robber who planned to shoot her in the back the moment they cleared the city limits. He was going to leave her. He was going to take my $300 million, launder it through crypto, and fly to Brazil with his real family, leaving Nia to face the mob enforcers who would come looking for their $5 million. He was leaving her to die. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, my hands trembling with a rage so profound it felt like a physical weight. I took pictures of everything, the messages, the photo of the boy, the flight confirmation numbers for Saturday morning to Rio de Janeiro, one-way tickets for Chase Miller, Veronica Sims, and Tobias Sims. I wanted to scream. I wanted to go upstairs, drag him out of bed, and throw him through the window. I wanted to break every bone in his body for treating my daughter like collateral damage, but I stopped myself. Violence was too easy. Violence was quick. Chase didn't deserve quick. He deserved to be dismantled. I finished taking the photos and pulled the USB drive out, slipping it back into my pocket. I closed the messaging app and cleared the recent activity, leaving the computer exactly as I had found it, locked, silent, holding its poison inside. I walked out of the office, closing the door until the latch clicked softly. I made my way back to the guest room, my steps heavy, my mind racing. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. The picture of the little boy stuck in my head, an innocent child caught in the middle of a war started by his father. I felt a pang of pity for the boy, but it was swallowed by the inferno burning for Chase. I looked at my phone at the evidence that could end this, right now. I could show Nia. I could walk upstairs, show her the picture of the kid, show her the texts where he called her an idiot and planned to leave her to the wolves. It would break her. It would shatter her world, and maybe, just maybe, it would bring her back to me. But then I remembered the poison. I remembered her face in the restaurant, the way she looked at me when she thought I was dying. She had made her choice. She had chosen him over me, over her father, over her conscience. If I saved her now, she wouldn't learn. She would just be a victim again. She would cry and beg and blame him for manipulating her. She would never take responsibility for the fact that she was willing to kill to keep him. No, I whispered to the empty room. She needs to feel it. She needs to feel the knife twist. She needs to be the one to open the door and find the empty closet. She needs to stand in the wreckage of her life and know that she built it. I wouldn't tell her, not yet. I would hold this card, this nuclear option, until the moment it would hurt the most. I would wait until she thought she had won, until she thought she was the queen of the castle, and then I would show her that she was just the jester. I heard footsteps upstairs, heavy pacing. Chase was awake. He was probably packing a bag in his mind, counting the hours until Saturday, planning his escape route. He thought he was the smartest man in the room. He thought he was playing chess while we were playing checkers. But he didn't know I had seen his board. He didn't know I had his queen in my sights. I lay back on the bed, clutching the phone to my chest. Let him run. Let him dream of Rio. Let him think he is getting away with it, because when he falls, he is going to fall from a height that will leave nothing but a stain. The door to my room rattled, then opened. Nia stood there looking disheveled, her eyes red and puffy. She held a tray with a sandwich and a glass of water. "I brought you lunch, Daddy," she said, her voice flat, devoid of the fake sweetness. She sounded tired, defeated. "Thank you, baby," I said, sitting up, acting the part of the grateful invalid. She set the tray down and looked at me for a long moment, like she was trying to find the father she used to know inside the shell she was trying to break. "Are you okay?" she asked, a flicker of genuine concern, or maybe just guilt crossing her face. "I am fine," I said, looking at her, looking at the woman who was about to lose everything. "I am just tired. Nia, getting old is hard. You trust people to hold you up, and sometimes they let you drop." She flinched, looking away. "Yeah," she whispered. "Sometimes they do." She turned and left, locking the door again. She didn't know how right I was. She didn't know that the drop was coming, and when it did, I wouldn't be there to catch her. I would be watching. The door to my room opened with a sharp click that cut through the silence of the afternoon like a gunshot. Nia stood in the doorway holding a plastic bin like she was coming to collect the trash, but the look in her eyes told me she was here to collect my lifeline. She walked over to the nightstand where my smartphone and tablet were charging. The devices were my only connection to the outside world, my only way to check on Cohen, my only way to see the news or track the stock market. She unplugged them, yanking the cords out of the wall with a violence that made me flinch. "Daddy, we need to make some changes," she said, her voice pitched high and tight like a violin string about to snap. Dr. Evans called, and he said, "All this screen time is bad for your condition. The radiation from the Wi-Fi and the cellular signals. It scrambles the brain waves, it makes the dementia worse. We cannot have that. We need you clear-headed, so I am going to hold on to these for you, just for a while, until you get better." I watched her drop my phone into the bin. The thud sounded like a coffin closing radiation. I thought bitterly she was not worried about radiation. She was worried about me calling my lawyer. She was worried about me checking my bank balance. She was cutting the lines, isolating the target. It was a classic siege tactic. Starve the enemy out, cut off their communications, and wait for them to surrender. I sat up in bed, clutching the sheets to my chest, playing the part of the frightened, confused old man. "But Nia," I stammered, my voice trembling, "how will I call you if I need something? What if I fall? What if I get scared?" She smiled, a cold, thin expression that didn't show any teeth. "You don't need to call me Daddy. I am right here in the house. We are all here. We locked the internet router too, just to be safe. No more distractions. You just rest. You just sleep. That is what you need, sleep." She turned and walked out, carrying my connection to the world in a $10 plastic bin. She locked the door again, leaving me in the dim light of the guest room, listening to the silence settle around me. Like a shroud, she thought she had disarmed me. She thought she had taken away my voice, my power. She thought I was just an old man in a room waiting to die. But as I sat there, in the gathering gloom, my mind drifted back 20 years, to a rainy Tuesday in a cemetery in Decatur, the day we buried Betty. Nia was 12 years old, standing under a black umbrella, looking small and broken, her hand in mine. I looked down at her, at the tears streaming down her face, and I made a vow that would seal both our fates. I swore I would never let her feel pain again. I swore I would give her everything she wanted, everything I never had. I remembered the pony I bought her when she was 14 because she saw one in a movie. I remembered the convertible I bought her for her 16th birthday, even though she had failed her driving test twice. I remembered paying off the headmaster when she got caught cheating on her SATs. I remembered funding her boutique that went bankrupt in 6 months and telling her it was the economy's fault, not hers. I had paved the road so smooth for her that she never learned how to walk on gravel. I had shielded her from every storm, so she never learned how to build a shelter. I had created this monster. I had fed it with my wallet and watered it with my guilt. And now that monster was standing on the other side of the door, waiting to devour me. It wasn't just greed that drove her, it was entitlement. The absolute certainty that she deserved everything I had simply because she existed. I had taught her that lesson well. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, my joints protesting the movement. I walked over to the closet where my few remaining clothes hung limply on wire hangers. On the floor in the back corner sat a pair of heavy work boots, old battered leather scuffed and stained with oil and grease. Nia hated them. She had tried to throw them out 3 times since I arrived, calling them filthy relics, but I had insisted on keeping them, claiming they were good for my arch support. She didn't know that those boots were the only thing in this house that were real. I picked up the left boot, feeling its weight. It was heavy, solid, comforting. I sat on the floor and pried up the inner sole, working my fingers under the worn fabric until I felt the catch. I pulled hard and the false heel popped open, revealing a small, hollowed-out compartment inside. Snugly wrapped in a piece of oilcloth was a burner phone, a cheap plastic flip phone that cost $20 at a gas station, the kind drug dealers and paranoid truckers use. I pulled it out, my thumb brushing over the rubber keypad. It was fully charged. I had checked it before I came here. Old habits die hard when you are hauling high-value cargo across state lines. You always have a backup. You always have a piece of gear that isn't on the manifest. I flipped it open, the small screen glowing with a pale green light signal. Strength was low, but it was there. I dialed a number from memory, a number that wasn't in my contact list, a number that Nia and Chase would never suspect. Jamal picked up on the second ring. "Yo, who is this?" "It is the old man." I whispered, my voice low, urgent. "Mr. Banks." Jamal's voice sharpened, losing the street edge, instantly. "Are you okay?" "I haven't heard from you since the hospital. I thought they got you." "They are trying, son," I said, looking at the door, making sure the lock was still engaged. "They cut the lines, took my phone, killed the internet. I am in the dark here, but I need a delivery." "Name it, Mr. Banks." "I need the package Cohen prepared for me, the blue envelope, the one with the leverage, and I need it now tonight." "They are moving fast, Jamal. They are going to try to certify me tomorrow. I can feel it." "I got you," Jamal said. "But how do I get in that place? Is a fortress. They got a gate. They got cameras." "You are going to deliver dinner," I said, a small smile touching my lips. "Order a pizza, extra large pepperoni deep dish from Gino's, the one on 4th Street. They deliver anywhere. Tell the gate guard you have a delivery for Mr. Chase Miller. Tell him it is already paid for and there is a big tip waiting at the door. Chase is greedy. He won't turn down free food. He thinks the world owes him lunch." "Smart?" Jamal chuckled. "I am on my way. Sit tight. Mr. Banks' help is coming." I closed the phone and tucked it back into the boot, snapping the heel shut and replacing the insole. I shoved the boots back into the corner and sat back on the bed. My heart rate elevated but steady. The waiting was the hardest part. The time between the call and the delivery, when your mind starts to play tricks on you, when you start to wonder if the cavalry is really coming or if you are just an old man talking to a shoe. An hour passed. Then 2. The house was quiet, settling into the night. I heard the distant hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the floorboards upstairs, then the sound of the intercom buzzer at the front gate, followed by the muffled voice of Chase over the speaker system, then the click of the gate unlocking. 5 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I heard footsteps upstairs, heavy and fast. Chase running down the stairs, eager for his free meal. I got up and moved to the door, pressing my ear against the wood. "Who is it?" I heard Nia ask from the living room. "Pizza." Chase yelled back, sounding confused but excited. "I didn't order pizza, did you?" "No," Nia said, her voice suspicious. "Maybe it is a mistake. Mistake or not, it is paid for," Chase said, opening the front door. I could hear the hinges squeak. "Pizza for Mr. Miller," a voice called out. Young, energetic Jamal playing the part perfectly. "Yeah, that is me," Chase said. "I didn't order this, though. Ticket says paid in full. Boss, extra pepperoni, compliments of a secret admirer, maybe." Jamal improvised, his tone light deferential. Chase laughed, a greedy, arrogant sound. "Well, I have always been popular. Give it here." "Wait," Nia's voice cut in sharp and cold. "Let me see that. Who sends a pizza to a house like this? Check the box." "Chase, it could be a prank or something worse." I held my breath. If they checked the box, if they looked under the grease-stained cardboard liner and found the blue envelope, it was over. Jamal would be compromised. I would be defenseless. "Just a pizza, lady, look," Jamal said. I heard the cardboard box flapping open. Cheese and meat. "See? Smells good, right? I gotta run. I got 3 more deliveries." Chase sniffed loud and wet. "It smells fine." "Nia, calm down. You are being paranoid. It is probably from one of the guys at the club. A joke. Eat the pizza." "Fine," Nia huffed. "Just close the door. You are letting the bugs in." "Wait," Jamal said, his voice raising slightly. "Hey, the ticket," said the old man. "Might want a slice. Said he is in the back room. Guest suite, right?" My boss said. "If I don't confirm the old man got his food, I don't get the tip. It is a weird request, but hey, $50 is $50. Silence, heavy and dangerous. Chase didn't care about me, but he cared about looking like a big shot in front of a delivery kid. He didn't want to seem like a jailer. "He is asleep," Chase lied, trying to dismiss him. "Please, sir," Jamal insisted, playing the desperate worker card. "My boss is a real hard ass. Just let me peek in. Let me set a slice on the table. I cannot afford to lose this tip. I got tuition to pay." Chase groaned. "Fine, whatever. Make it quick. He is down the hall on the left. Just put it on the nightstand and get out. Do not wake him up." I scrambled back to the bed, throwing the covers over my legs and slumping against the pillows, letting my mouth hang open, aiming for the look of a man medicated into oblivion. The lock turned. The door opened. Light from the hallway flooded the dark room, blinding me for a second. I squinted, seeing a silhouette in the doorway holding a flat, square box. Jamal stepped in, moving quick and silent. He didn't look at me. He didn't say a word. He walked straight to the nightstand, set the pizza box down, and in one smooth motion slid a thick blue envelope from under his jacket and tucked it under my pillow. His hand brushed my shoulder, a brief, reassuring squeeze. "Delivery," he whispered, barely audible. "Eat up." He turned and walked out, pulling the door shut behind him. Chase was waiting in the hall. "Did you see him? Is he alive?" "Yeah, he is out cold, sleeping like a baby," Jamal called back. "Thanks for the tip, boss." The front door slammed, the lock clicked, and the house returned to its sullen quiet. I waited 10 minutes, counting the seconds, listening to the sounds of Chase and Nia devouring the pizza in the kitchen, arguing about who sent it, unsuspecting. When I was sure they were distracted, I reached under the pillow and pulled out the blue envelope. It was thick, heavy, sealed with tape. I ripped it open carefully, my hands shaking just a little. Inside was a stack of papers fresh from Cohen's office. I pulled out the first document and held it up to the thin sliver of light coming from the street lamp outside. It was a deed of sale for the loan $5 million of debt transferred from the Ivanov Syndicate to Nemesis Holdings LLC. Effective, immediately signed, sealed, and delivered. I smiled in the darkness, running my thumb over the embossed seal. I owned him. I owned his debt. I owned his fear. And by tomorrow morning, I would own his fate. Beneath the deed were other papers. Printouts of emails, photos, surveillance logs. Cohen had been busy. He had found everything. The mistress, the kid, the crypto wallets, the texts where Chase called Nia an idiot. It was all there. A paper trail of betrayal that led straight to hell. I shoved the papers back into the envelope and hid it inside the lining of my mattress. They had taken my phone. They had taken my internet. They had locked me in a room and fed me soup. But they forgot one thing. They forgot that I built this life on logistics, on moving things from point A to point B when everyone said it couldn't be done. I lay back in the dark, listening to the wind rattle the window panes. Let them eat their pizza. Let them sleep in their stolen house tomorrow. I was going to make a call, and when I did, the ground was going to open up beneath their feet. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I rehearsed the play-by-play in my head, refining the trap, sharpening the blade. I was not a father anymore. I was a judge, and the court was now in session. The morning sun was trying to push through the heavy velvet drapes of the living room, but the atmosphere inside the house was cold enough to freeze mercury. Chase was pacing the Persian rug, wearing a path through the expensive fibers, his phone clutched in his hand like a grenade. He was waiting for a call from his contact at the bank, hoping for a miracle, hoping that maybe the wire transfer he had forged would go through, but I knew the only thing coming down the line was judgment. I sat in the corner on a stiff, backed chair, my hands folded over my stomach, watching him unravel. Nia was in the kitchen, nervously rearranging the spice rack, trying to pretend that her life wasn't hanging by a thread. They had fed me breakfast, a bowl of oatmeal that tasted like paste, and then ignored me, treating me like a piece of furniture that had outlived its warranty. At 10 o'clock exactly, Chase's phone rang. It wasn't the bank ringtone, it was the sharp, jarring buzz of an unknown number. Chase stopped pacing. He looked at the screen, his brow furrowing confusion, warring with fear. He answered, putting the phone to his ear with a tentative hello. I couldn't hear the voice on the other end, but I knew exactly what was being said because I had written the script. Cohen was using a voice modulator, something that made him sound like gravel crunching under a tire, stripping away his lawyerly polish and leaving only the cold menace of a man who collects debts for a living. Chase's face went from pale to translucent in the span of 3 seconds. His knees actually buckled, and he had to grab the back of the sofa to stay upright. "What do you mean?" "Bought the debt," he stammered, his voice pitching up an octave. "Who is this?" Nemesis? Holdings? I don't know any Nemesis holdings. He listened for a moment longer, and then he started to shake violent tremors that started in his hands and worked their way down to his expensive loafers. No, you cannot do that. The agreement with the Ivanovs was until Friday. I have time. I watched him listen to the terms: immediate payment of $1 million in interest due within 24 hours, or the collection team would start taking collateral. Starting with his left pinky finger, Cohen was improvising the finger part, a nice touch of theatrical brutality that I appreciated. But I don't have $1 million liquid. Chase screamed, losing all composure. Listen to me. My father-in-law is Luther Banks. He is worth hundreds of millions. He is right here. I just need a few days to access the accounts, please. You have to listen. He pulled the phone away from his ear, staring at it with wide, terrified eyes. The line had gone dead. The message was delivered. The clock was ticking louder than ever. Chase dropped the phone onto the sofa and stood there, breathing hard, hyperventilating. He looked like a man who had just seen his own ghost. Nia came running in from the kitchen, drying her hands on a dish towel, her eyes wide with panic. "Who was that, Chase? What happened?" she asked, reaching for him. He spun on her, his eyes wild, grabbing her by the shoulders and shaking her hard enough to make her head snap back. "They sold the debt, Naya. The Russians sold the debt to some holding company, Nemesis. Something they want $1 million by tomorrow morning, or they are going to start cutting pieces off of me." Naya let out a small scream, putting her hands to her mouth. $1 million. "Chase, we don't have that. We spent the last of the cash on the forger." Chase pushed her away, pacing again, raking his hands through his hair, messing up his perfect styling. Think. We need money. We need liquid assets now." He stopped pacing and turned slowly to look at me. I was sitting there blinking slowly, looking at the wall, pretending to count the flowers on the wallpaper, behaving like a man whose mind had drifted out to sea. But Chase didn't see a man. He saw a piggy bank. He saw a safe waiting to be cracked. "The key," he whispered, his voice trembling with a sudden manic hope. "The safety deposit box key, the one he keeps around his neck." Nia looked at me, confusion clouding her face. "What key?" "The key to his personal vault at First National," Chase said, rushing toward me, his eyes predatory. "He told me about it years ago. He keeps the emergency cash there, the gold, the bonds. He said he never takes it off. He was remembering a story I told him at a barbecue 5 years ago, a story about how old truckers keep a stash for a rainy day. It was true. I did have a box and I did have a key, but I hadn't worn it in a decade." Chase was grasping at straws. He was hallucinating salvation. He grabbed the front of my shirt, yanking me forward, the fabric bunching tight against my throat. "Old man, where is it?" he shouted, spit flying into my face. "Where is the key?" I looked at him, letting my eyes widen in fake terror, letting my lip tremble. "What key, son? The key to the truck it is in the ignition. Not the truck, you senile bat." Chase roared, shaking me. "The necklace, the chain. The key to the bank, give it to me." He ripped my shirt open, buttons popping and bouncing on the floor, exposing my chest. There was no chain, there was no key, just the scar from a bypass surgery and the gray hair of an old man. "It is not here," he screamed. Turning to Nia, "Search the room. Search his room. He must have hidden it." Nia hesitated, looking at me with a flicker of guilt buried under layers of greed. "Chase, we can't just—" "Do you want me to lose a finger?" Chase yelled, getting in her face. "Do you want them to come here and burn this house down? Find the damn key, Nia." She flinched, then nodded, her face hardening. She grabbed my arm, hauling me up from the chair. "Come on, Daddy, show us where you put it. Show us where the key is." They dragged me down the hall to the guest room, shoving me inside so hard I stumbled and fell onto the bed. I stayed there, huddled against the pillows, watching them tear my temporary sanctuary apart. It was a frenzy, a violent explosion of desperation. Chase ripped the sheets off the bed, shaking them out, throwing the pillows across the room. He flipped the mattress, slamming it against the wall, searching the frame, searching the slats. Nia went for the drawers. She pulled them out, dumping my clothes onto the floor, my socks, my underwear, my shirts, all of it forming a sad pile of cotton and wool. She went through the pockets, turning them inside out, throwing them aside when they came up empty. "Where is it?" Old man Chase yelled, kicking a box of tissues across the room. "I know you have it. Where did you put it? Did you swallow it?" I sat up, wrapping my arms around my knees, rocking back and forth, humming a low tune, pretending to be lost in a memory, pretending the violence wasn't happening. "I am looking for Betty. I mumbled softly. She has the keys. She took the keys to the store. Chase groaned a sound of pure frustration, shutting his eyes and tilting his head back. God help me. I am going to kill him. I am going to kill him with my bare hands. Keep looking. Nia snapped, her voice shrill. She was on her knees now, looking under the dresser, running her hands along the baseboards, looking for loose panels, looking for a hiding spot that didn't exist. Look in his shoes, check the boots. Chase grabbed my heavy work boots from the corner, the ones with the hidden phone, and turned them upside down, shaking them violently. Nothing fell out. He threw them down in disgust, unaware that he had just held his own destruction in his hands. He didn't check the heels. He didn't look for the false bottom. He was looking for gold, not technology. He was too arrogant to think an old man would have a burner. They tore the closet apart, pulling down the hangers, searching the pockets of my coats. They checked the bathroom, dumping out my toiletry bag, spilling my shaving cream and pills into the sink. They were thorough, they were brutal, and they were completely empty-handed. Chase stood in the center of the room, his chest heaving, surrounded by the debris of my life. He looked at me, his eyes burning with a mixture of hatred and fear. He looked like a child who had broken his toy because it wouldn't do what he wanted. It is not here, he whispered, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. It is not here. He moved it, he hid it somewhere else, or he lost it. The old fool lost the only thing that could save us. Nia sat back on her heels amidst the pile of my clothes, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. We are dead, she sobbed. We are dead. Chase, they are going to come for us. Chase looked at her, then at me. He walked over to the bed and leaned down, his face inches from mine, his breath smelling of sour coffee and fear. You listen to me, Luther, he hissed, his voice low and trembling. If you don't remember where that key is by tonight, I am not going to wait for the dementia to take you. I am going to take you apart, myself. Do you understand me? Think hard, old man, think hard. He straightened up, adjusting his jacket, trying to regain some semblance of control, but I could see the tremor in his hands. I could smell the sweat of a man who knows the clock is ticking. Clean this up, he barked at Nia. Keep him in here. Don't let him sleep until he tells you where it is. He stormed out of the room, kicking the doorframe as he went. Nia looked at me, wiping her eyes, then looked at the mess. She stood up, not bothering to pick up the clothes, not bothering to fix the bed. She just walked out, slamming the door and locking it, leaving me alone in the wreckage. I waited until their footsteps faded down the hall, until I heard the front door slam as Chase went out, probably to try and beg for more time from someone who wouldn't give it. I slowly uncurled my legs and sat on the edge of the bed. I looked around the room at the chaos they had created, at the disrespect they had shown for the few things I had brought with me. They had turned my room into a landfill, searching for a key that was sitting safely in a safety deposit box across town. A key that opened a box containing nothing but a photo of Betty and a spare set of truck keys. I reached down and picked up the picture of Betty from where it had fallen on the floor. I wiped a smudge of dust from her face, placing it carefully on the nightstand. I leaned back in the armchair in the corner, the only piece of furniture they hadn't overturned, and I let the darkness of the room wrap around me. I listened to the silence of the house, a silence that was heavy with dread and impending doom. They were running in circles, chasing ghosts, while the real threat was sitting right here in the corner watching them. I let a small, cold smile touch my lips. Search away, children, I whispered to the empty room. Tear the walls down. Rip up the floorboards. You can look for 100 years, and you will never find what you are looking for because you are looking for money, and the only thing left in this house is consequences. I closed my eyes and waited for the night tomorrow the interest rate would go up again, and Chase Miller was about to find out that he couldn't pay the bill. The house was vibrating with the frantic energy of a bomb about to detonate. Chase had turned over every drawer, slashed open every mattress, and emptied every bookshelf looking for the key to a safety deposit box that didn't exist in this house. He was sweating through his shirt, his eyes bloodshot and wild, pacing the living room like a caged tiger that hadn't eaten in weeks. The deadline from Nemesis Holdings was ticking down less than 12 hours before they came for his fingers, or worse. I sat in my armchair in the corner of the wrecked guest room, staring at the wall, humming an old gospel tune under my breath. To them, I was a senile old man lost in a fog. In reality, I was the warden watching the inmates riot. Chase stormed into the room, dragging Nia by the arm. He didn't even look at me. He was past caring about witnesses. He threw her toward the dresser, his grip leaving red marks on her skin. Think, Naya, he hissed, spit flying from his lips. Think. The old man doesn't have the cash key. Fine, but he has assets. Tangible assets. Where are they? Nia was sobbing, her mascara running down her face in black rivers. I don't know, Chase. I told you he keeps everything in the bank. We looked everywhere. Chase grabbed her face, squeezing her cheeks until her lips puckered. Not everything. Your mother, Betty. She had jewelry. I saw the insurance riders years ago. A necklace, diamonds, vintage Cartier. Where is it? I stopped humming. My heart gave a painful thud against my ribs. Betty's diamonds. I bought that necklace for her in 1995 after we landed the contract with the shipping yards in Savannah. It was the first real money we ever spent on ourselves. She wore it to church on Easter and to the opera once a year. It was her pride. Nia's eyes darted toward the velvet box sitting on top of the highboy dresser. It wasn't hidden. It was sitting right there, gathering dust right next to a framed photo of Betty and me. Chase followed her gaze. He saw the box. He let go of Nia and lunged for it, his hands shaking as he flipped the lid open. The light from the hallway hit the stones and they exploded with fire. A river of white light, a necklace, earrings, and a heavy bracelet. To the naked eye, they looked like $250,000 of high-grade ice. Bingo, Chase whispered, a sick grin spreading across his face. He pulled the necklace out, draping it over his hairy hand. Look at that fire. That is high clarity. That is easily $200,000 on the street. Maybe more if we find the right buyer. He turned to Nia, shoving the box into her chest. Go. Take it. Nia recoiled, clutching the box like it was hot coal. Chase, no. That is Mom S. That is the only thing I have left of her. Dad promised it to me for my 40th birthday. We cannot sell this. Chase slapped her. It wasn't a hard slap, not like a punch, but it was sharp and disrespectful, a backhand to the cheek that snapped her head to the side. Wake up, you stupid cow, he snarled. There is no 40th birthday if the Ivanovs burn this house down with us inside. Do you want to be a widow? Do you want to be dead? Take the damn diamonds to the guy in Little 5 Points, the one your friend used. Get cash. Do not take a check. Get cash and bring it back here before sunset. Nia looked at him, holding her cheek, tears spilling over. Then she looked at me. I was staring blankly at the ceiling, drool pooling slightly at the corner of my mouth, playing the vegetable. I saw the conflict in her eyes. I saw the greed warring with the last shred of sentimentality she had left. She looked back at the diamonds. Greed won. It always won with Naya. I am sorry, Mom, she whispered to the empty air, not to me. She snapped the box shut, shoved it into her purse, and ran out of the room. I heard the front door slam a moment later, followed by the roar of her engine peeling out of the driveway. Chase stood there for a moment, panting, holding his own hand where he had hit her. He looked at me, his eyes cold. You should have just given me the money, old man, he muttered. Now you are going to lose everything. He walked out, leaving me alone in the silence. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a handkerchief, wiping my mouth. I sat up straighter, my eyes clearing. Lose everything. No, son. I haven't lost a thing. See, Chase didn't know about the swap. He didn't know that 3 weeks ago, when I first started smelling the rot in my family, I took that velvet box to a jeweler in Buckhead, a man I have known for 30 years. I had him remove every single stone, the diamonds, the emeralds, the sapphires, and replace them with cubic zirconia, high-grade, lab-created stones. They sparkled just like the real thing under a bedroom light. They fool the eye of a greedy amateur, but they don't fool a fence. They don't fool a professional criminal who looks at merchandise through a loop. The real diamonds were sitting in a vault at the First National Bank, safe and sound. What Nia had in her purse was worth about $300 on a good day, and she was taking them to a black market buyer, a man who expected high-value goods and didn't take kindly to being insulted with costume jewelry. I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes. I wasn't praying for her safety. I was praying she learned the lesson fast. You don't steal from the dead, and you don't try to hustle a hustler. The hours ticked by. The sun went down, casting long, bruised shadows across the floor. Chase was pacing in the living room, checking his watch every 30 seconds, muttering to himself. He was counting the money before it was in his hand. He was already spending it in his head. At 9 p.m., the back door opened. Not the front door, the front. The kitchen door. I heard stumbling footsteps, a stifled sob, then the sound of running water. I stood up, grabbing my cane, and shuffled into the kitchen. The lights were off. Nia was standing at the sink splashing cold water on her face. She didn't hear me come in. "Nia," I said, my voice raspy. She spun around, gasping, dropping the paper towel she was holding. The moonlight streaming through the window hit her face, and I felt a cold jolt in my stomach, even though I expected it, seeing it was different. Her left eye was swollen shut, a purple and black lump the size of a golf ball. Her lip was split, crusted with dried blood. Her expensive blouse was torn at the shoulder, and there was a dark bruise forming on her neck shaped like a handprint. She looked like she had been thrown out of a moving car. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice thick and wet. "Go back to bed." I shuffled closer, leaning on the cane. "What happened, baby girl? Did you fall?" She flinched when I reached out. She turned her face away, hiding the damage. I fell. Yes. I fell down the stairs at the store. It is nothing. Go to sleep." She was lying to me, but more importantly, she was preparing to lie to Chase. She didn't have the money. I knew that. The fence, whoever he was, had taken one look at those stones, realized she was trying to pass off glass as diamonds, and he had taught her a lesson in street economics. He probably kept the fakes just for the insult and beat her out the door. She was empty-handed, battered, and she had to go in there and tell the man who sent her on this errand that she had failed. "Where is the money?" Chase's voice boomed from the hallway. He flicked the light switch, flooding the kitchen with harsh fluorescent glare. Nia cringed, covering her face with her hands. Chase stopped in the doorway. He looked at her battered face, at the torn clothes. He didn't ask if she was okay. He didn't run to help her. His eyes scanned her empty hands, her flat purse. "Where is the cash, Nia?" he demanded, stepping into the room. Nia started to shake, sobbing uncontrollably. He said they were fake, Chase. He said they were glass. He thought I was trying to rob him. He took them. He took them and he hit me. He said if I ever came back, he would kill me." Chase stared at her. His face went red, then purple. "Fake," he screamed. "Cartier diamonds, fake. You are lying. You stole the money. You kept it for yourself." "No," Nia shrieked, backing up against the counter. "I swear. Look at me. Look at my face. He beat me." "Chase, I don't care about your face," Chase roared, advancing on her. "I care about the $5 million I owe by tomorrow morning. You lost the only leverage we had, you stupid incompetent." He raised his hand. I didn't move. I didn't step in. I stood by the refrigerator watching. I watched the man she chose over me raise his hand to strike her while she was already bleeding. I watched the daughter who poisoned me cower in fear of the monster she married. This was the bed she made. This was the house she built. Chase didn't hit her. He punched the cabinet next to her head, splintering the wood. Nia screamed and slid down to the floor, curling into a ball. "You are useless," Chase spat at her. "Totally useless. Just like your father." He turned and stormed out of the kitchen, kicking a chair as he went. I heard him go into the garage. I heard the sound of him rummaging through tools. Nia sat on the floor, weeping, cradling her broken face. She looked up at me through her one good eye. There was no recognition in it. No realization that I had swapped the jewels. She just saw a confused old man witnessing her shame. "Daddy," she whimpered. "Help me." I looked down at her. I remembered the poison in the wine. I remembered the text messages calling me an idiot. I remembered her signing the power of attorney. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a peppermint candy, the kind I used to give her when she scraped her knee as a kid. I placed it on the floor next to her. "It will be okay, baby," I said, my voice hollow. "Betty will fix it. Betty always fixes it." I turned and walked back to my room, the tapping of my cane the only sound in the house. I closed the door and locked it. I sat on the bed and exhaled a long, shaky breath. The jewels were gone. Nia was broken. Chase was desperate. The pieces were falling into place. Tomorrow was the deadline. Chase had no money, no assets, and no time. He was going to make a mistake. A big one. And I was going to be right there to catch it on camera. The morning sun hit the chrome grille of my vintage Bentley Continental, glistening like a promise of salvation in the driveway. Chase was staring at it through the living room window, his eyes wide and bloodshot. He hadn't slept since Nia came back, beaten and empty-handed. The clock on the wall was ticking louder now, a rhythmic countdown to the moment the Ivanov syndicate would come to collect their pound of flesh. I sat in the kitchen nursing a cup of lukewarm tea, watching him unravel. He was vibrating with adrenaline and terror. He looked at the car, then back at the clock. He did the math in his head. I could see the gears turning, grinding against the rust of his desperation. That car was worth $200,000. Easy, maybe more to the right collector. It wasn't enough to pay the whole debt, but it was enough to buy another day, enough to keep his fingers attached to his hands. He didn't ask me for the keys. He didn't try to manipulate me into signing a title transfer. He was past negotiation. He stormed into the kitchen, grabbing the spare keyring from the hook by the door, his movements jerky and aggressive. "I am taking the car," he announced, not looking at me, just throwing the words over his shoulder like a challenge. I looked up, blinking slowly, letting my hand shake as I reached for my mug. "Taking the car." "Son," I mumbled. "Where are you going?" "Betty likes that car. She likes the leather seats." "Shut up about Betty," Chase snapped, snatching the keys. He looked at Nia, who was sitting at the table nursing a cup of coffee, her face a roadmap of bruises and regret. "Don't just sit there," he hissed at her. "Keep him quiet. If anyone calls, tell them I took it for a wash. Do not answer the door." He didn't wait for an answer. He spun on his heel and marched out the back door. I heard the heavy thud of the garage access door. Then the roar of the W12 engine coming to life, a deep, guttural growl that usually made me smile. Today it sounded like a trap springing shut. I watched through the window as he backed the massive silver beast out of the driveway, tires screeching on the asphalt. He didn't look back. He peeled out onto the main road, heading toward the luxury auto district, heading toward a quick cash sale. He thought he had found a loophole. He thought he had found a lifeline. I took a sip of my tea and set the mug down with a steady hand, my tremor vanishing the moment the car was out of sight. Poor Chase, I whispered to the empty kitchen. He didn't know that I had made a phone call at 5 a.m. This morning, while he was pacing the floor upstairs, crying into his scotch, I had called my old friend Detective Henderson, the same man I used to drink coffee with at the precinct back when I was hauling freight for the city. I had reported the vehicle stolen. I gave him the license plate, the description, and a very specific detail. I told him. The thief was a white male, mid-30s, likely armed and dangerous, suffering from a drug-induced episode. I told him I was terrified for my safety. Chase wasn't driving a getaway car. He was driving a rolling felony stop. I closed my eyes and pictured the route he was taking. He would head for the interstate, trying to get to the high-end dealerships in Buckhead. He would be speeding, weaving through traffic, sweating through his shirt, gripping the steering wheel like it was a life raft. 20 minutes later, my burner phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Jamal, who was monitoring the police scanner app on his break. "They got him, Mr. Banks Highway 400 southbound. 5 cruisers. They did a felony stop, pulled him out through the window." I allowed myself a small, grim smile. "Chaos is a ladder. Chase and you just missed a rung." The scene played out in my mind with cinematic clarity. Chase seeing the blue lights flashing in his rearview mirror, the initial confusion turning to panic as he realized they weren't just pulling him over for speeding, the loudspeaker booming for him to turn off the engine and throw the keys out the window, the realization that he couldn't talk his way out of this one, not with a gun pointed at his head. He was on the asphalt now, face pressed into the grit handcuffs, biting into his wrists, screaming that it was a mistake, screaming that it was his father-in-law's car, screaming that he had permission. But the system doesn't care about screams. It cares about reports. And the report said, stolen. Back in the kitchen, the house phone rang. It was the landline, the one number he could remember. Nia jumped, staring at it like it was a bomb. She looked at me, checking if I was lucid enough to notice. "Answer it, baby," I mumbled. "I think it is the church asking for donations." Nia grabbed the receiver, her hand shaking hello. I watched her face crumble, the color draining away, leaving her bruises standing out in stark relief. Dark purple against pale gray. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Chase, where are you, jail?" She listened, tears welling up in her one good eye. "Stealing." She squeaked. "No, no. Tell them it is a mistake. Tell them my dad let you." She stopped, realizing the futility of it. Luther Banks, the owner of the car, had reported it. She looked at me with a mix of horror and confusion, but I was just an old man staring at his oatmeal, oblivious. "Bail," she said, her voice trembling. "How much?" She winced as he shouted on the other end. $10,000, she whispered. 10,000 cash or a bond. "Chase, we don't have 10,000. We gave the forger everything." She listened again, flinching as he screamed at her through the line. He was blaming her. He was telling her to fix it, to find the money, or he was dead meat in that holding cell. Okay, she sobbed. "Stop yelling. I will find it. I will figure something out. I promise. Just don't hang up." but the line clicked dead. His one phone call was over. Chase was being processed, fingerprinted, stripped of his Italian suit, and put into an orange jumpsuit. He was entering a world where his arrogance wouldn't buy him a cup of coffee. Nia dropped the phone and slid down the wall, sitting on the floor with her head in her hands. She was trapped. She had no access to my accounts. Thanks to the security freeze, she had no jewelry left to sell. She had nothing except the emergency stash she kept hidden in the bottom of her makeup case. Money she had been skimming from the grocery budget for years. A few grand meant for a rainy day. Well, it was pouring now. She scrambled up and ran out of the room. I heard her rummaging upstairs, heard the sound of a ceramic pig being smashed. She came back down, clutching a handful of crumpled bills and a credit card she had sworn she cut up years ago. "I have to go, Daddy," she said, breathless, frantic. "Chase is in trouble. I have to go get him. You stay here. Don't open the door for anyone." She ran out, leaving me alone again. She was going to bail out the man who hit her, the man who planned to leave her. She was emptying her last reserves for a sinking ship. It was pathetic, but it was necessary. She needed to be completely empty before she could be refilled with anything resembling sense. 6 hours passed. The sun moved across the sky, casting long shadows through the kitchen window. I made myself a sandwich, eating slowly, keeping my strength up. I checked the cameras on my tablet, monitoring the driveway, waiting for the return of the prodigal son. A taxi pulled up as the sun began to set. The Bentley was gone, impounded evidence in a grand theft auto case. Chase got out first. He looked like a man who had been chewed up and spit out. His shirt was torn, his hair was matted, and he walked with a limp, likely a parting gift from the handling officers or a cellmate who didn't like his attitude. Nia followed him, looking smaller than ever. Her shoulders hunched. She had saved him, but she knew there would be no gratitude. She knew what was coming. They burst into the house, the door slamming behind them. Chase didn't even look at me. He spun on Nia, his face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. "You stupid, useless woman," he screamed, his voice raw. "You let him call the cops. You let that senile old bat call the police on me while I was driving his car. It wasn't my fault." Chase, Nia cried, backing away, her hands raised to protect her face. "I didn't know he called. I thought he was asleep. I thought he didn't know how to use the phone." "You thought," Chase mocked, mimicking her voice. "You thought you are supposed to be watching him. You are supposed to be managing him. That is your one job. Nia, keep the old man quiet. Keep him happy, and you let him send me to jail. Do you know what they did to me in there? Do you know who I had to call to get a lawyer?" He advanced on her, backing her into the kitchen island. I sat at the table, perfectly still, a statue witnessing a crime. I lost the car. "Nia," Chase roared, slamming his fist onto the granite counter. The countertop cracked a sharp sound like a bone breaking. That car was our lifeline. I could have gotten $50,000 for it, fast cash enough to hold off the Russians for a week now. It is gone, impounded, and I am out on bail for grand theft auto. He grabbed a vase of flowers from the counter and threw it against the wall. Glass shattering, water and stems flying everywhere. Nia screamed, covering her head. "Look at him!" Chase shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Look at him sitting there drooling. He did this. He knows, Nia. He knows everything, and you are too stupid to see it. He is sick." "Chase," Nia sobbed. "He doesn't know what day it is." "He knows enough to call the cops," Chase yelled. He grabbed Nia by the shoulders, shaking her violently. "Fix this, Nia. Fix it tonight, or I swear to God, I will leave you here for the Ivanovs. I will walk out that door and let them strip this house to the studs with you inside." He shoved her away hard. She stumbled, tripping over her own feet and falling to the floor. Landing hard on her hip, she cried out, a sound of pain and humiliation. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles white. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to stand up, to grab the cane and break it over his back, to end him right there, to protect my child. But I forced myself to stay seated. I forced my face to remain blank, my eyes empty. If I interfered, now if I saved her, now she would never leave him. She would think he was just stressed. She would make excuses. She would say it was my fault for calling the police. She needed to see him for what he was: a coward, a bully, a man who beat his wife because he was too weak to fight his own battles. She needed to feel the cold, hard floor beneath her and realize that he was the one who put her there, not me. Chase looked down at her, sneering, pathetic. He spat. "You are just like your father. Weak, old, useless." He turned and stormed out of the kitchen, heading for the liquor cabinet. I heard the clink of glass, the sound of a bottle opening. He was going to drink until he passed out. He was going to drown his failure in expensive scotch. Nia lay on the floor sobbing quietly, holding her side. She looked up at me through her swollen eyes, searching for comfort, searching for her daddy. But I gave her nothing. I stared through her, my face a mask of indifference. She had to break completely. The bone had to be reset, and that meant the pain had to be absolute. "I am sorry, Daddy," she whispered to the floor. "Not to me. I am so sorry." I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. I walked past her, my cane tapping a steady rhythm. I didn't offer her a hand. I didn't offer her a tissue. I walked out of the kitchen, leaving her on the floor in the mess she had married into. I went to my room and locked the door. I sat on the bed and pulled out the tablet, checking the camera feed from the kitchen. Nia was still on the floor, weeping, rocking back and forth. It broke my heart, but it hardened my resolve. Tomorrow was the deadline. Tomorrow the note came due. Chase had no car, no money, no jewelry, and no dignity. He was a rat in a corner, and rats in corners do desperate, stupid things. I turned off the tablet and lay back in the dark, listening to the sounds of my daughter crying and my son-in-law drinking. Let them cry, let them drink. Tomorrow I was bringing the gavel down, and when I did, there would be no bail, no second chances, just the long, hard fall to the bottom. The house smelled of bleach and betrayal. It was a sharp chemical scent that burned the back of my throat, masking the underlying odor of fear that had permeated the drywall. Nia was on her hands and knees in the living room, scrubbing the hardwood floor where the dog had vomited days ago. She was wearing old sweatpants and a t-shirt that had seen better days. Her hair tied back in a messy bun, she looked like the Cinderella of the suburbs, but there was no fairy godmother coming to save her, only a wicked stepfather who was about to teach her a lesson in loyalty. Chase was holed up in the study, the door locked tight. He had been in there for hours, pacing, muttering, making phone calls he thought were private. He didn't know that the bug I slipped into Nia's purse was now stuck to the underside of his desk chair, enjoying a front row seat to his unraveling. He was desperate. He was out of options. The Ivanovs' deadline was looming like a dark cloud on the horizon less than 24 hours before they came to collect, and Chase Miller, the man who thought he was a king, was realizing he was just a pawn. I sat in my usual spot, the armchair in the corner of the room, clutching my cane, staring blankly at the television that wasn't turned on. I had my earpiece in, hidden beneath my gray hair, listening to the rat scurrying around in the walls, trying to find a way out. I heard the phone ring in the study. I heard Chase answer, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and calculated deceit. "Mr. Cohen," he said, his voice cracking. "Thank God you picked up. Listen, we need to talk off the record, just man to man." I signaled Cohen on my burner phone, a quick text that said he is biting record everything. I heard Cohen's voice in my ear, cool, professional, detached, like a surgeon preparing to cut Mr. Miller. "I represent your father-in-law. I do not see what we have to discuss off the record, unless you are preparing to return the assets you misappropriated." No, it is not about that," Chase stammered. I could hear him sweating. I could hear the squeak of the leather chair as he shifted his weight. "Look, Cohen, I know how this looks. I know what Nia has been doing." I froze. The name hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. He was pivoting. He was shifting the target. "What has your wife been doing?" Mr. Miller Cohen asked, his voice neutral, inviting the betrayal. Chase lowered his voice, a conspiratorial whisper that made my stomach turn. "She is out of control, Cohen. She is the one pushing for the guardianship. She is the one who hired the forger. I tried to stop her. I swear I told her it was wrong, but she is obsessed. She hates her father. She has hated him for years. She says he ruined her life. She says he owes her that money." I watched Nia scrubbing the floor, her shoulders moving in a rhythm of exhaustion. She was working to save their home, to clean up his mess, and he was in the next room selling her down the river for a life raft. And the poison, Cohen asked, dropping the bomb. There was a silence, a long pause where Chase weighed his soul against his survival. "It was her." He whispered, the words rushing out like vomit. "It was all her idea. She bought the neurotoxin online from some dark website. She put it in the ring. She poured it. I saw her do it, Cohen." I was terrified. I didn't drink it because I knew, but I couldn't stop her. She is dangerous. She is mentally unstable. I gripped my cane so hard the wood creaked. He was rewriting history, painting himself as the hostage and his wife as the mastermind. It was a lie. Of course they were partners in crime, Bonnie and Clyde, with a mortgage, but seeing him turn on her so quickly, so easily, it was a revelation. It confirmed everything I suspected about Chase Miller. He didn't love anyone but himself. "So why are you telling me this now?" Cohen asked, cutting to the chase. "I want a deal," Chase said, his voice gaining strength, fueled by the hope of escape. "I can give you evidence. I can testify against her. I can prove she forged the signatures. I can prove she planned the poisoning. I have texts. I have emails. She sent me crazy stuff." Cohen talking about how she couldn't wait for the old man to die, and in exchange, Cohen asked, "Immunity?" Chase said, breathless, civil, and criminal. "I want a walk. I want the debt with the holding company cleared, the $5 million. I want a ticket out of here, and maybe a little severance, for my trouble. Say, $2 million cash, enough to start over somewhere else. I will disappear. You will never see me again." Nia goes to jail. Luther gets his justice, and I get a fresh start. Everybody wins. Everybody wins. I thought everybody except the woman scrubbing the floor, the woman who had lied for him, stolen for him, and taken a beating for him. He was selling her out for $2 million, 30 pieces of silver adjusted for inflation. "I have it all on tape," Cohen said, his voice cold as ice. "I will take your offer under advisement. Mr. Miller, do not leave town." The line clicked dead. Chase let out a whoop of joy, a sound of pure, unadulterated relief. He thought he had done it. He thought he had outsmarted the room. He started laughing. A manic, high-pitched sound. I took the earpiece out and put it in my pocket. I looked at Nia. She was wiping sweat from her forehead, unaware that her husband had just signed her death warrant. She looked tired, beaten down, a shadow of the girl she used to be. I stood up, my knees popping. I walked over to the high-tech sound system Chase had installed last year, a $10,000 setup that could shake the windows. I knew how to use it because I paid for it. I pulled out my phone and connected to the Bluetooth. The little blue light on the speaker bar blinked, confirming the connection. Nia looked up, startled. "Daddy, what are you doing?" "Do not touch that. You will break it." I didn't answer. I just tapped the screen, selecting the audio file Cohen had just uploaded to our shared cloud. I turned the volume up all the way. Chase's voice boomed through the living room, amplified, crisp and clear, surrounded by the expensive acoustics he loved so much. "She is out of control, Cohen. She is the one pushing for the guardianship. She hates her father. She says he ruined her life." Nia froze. She dropped the scrub brush. It clattered onto the wood floor, splashing soapy water onto her legs. She stared at the speaker, her mouth opening and closing, confusion warring with disbelief. Then Chase's voice again, louder this time, condemning. "It was her. She bought the neurotoxin. She poured it. I was terrified. I couldn't stop her. She is dangerous." Nia slowly stood up, her face draining of color. She looked at the ceiling toward the study where her husband was celebrating his betrayal. She looked at me, and for the first time she didn't see a senile old man. She saw the executioner. "I want immunity. I want to walk. I want $2 million cash." Nia goes to jail. Luther gets his justice. The recording ended, leaving a ringing silence in the room, broken only by the sound of Nia's breathing, ragged and shallow. She was shaking her hands, clenched into fists at her sides. The betrayal was absolute. It was total. It was worse than the debt, worse than the mistress. It was the final knife in the back. The door to the study opened. Chase walked out onto the landing, beaming. He looked like a man who had just won the lottery. He didn't know what had just played downstairs. He didn't know the walls had ears, and the ears had a voice. "Honey," he called out cheerfully, his tone jarring against the tension in the room. "Pack a bag. I think I found a way out of this. We are going to be okay." Nia let out a sound that was half scream, half sob, a primal noise of rage. She ran for the stairs, taking them two at a time. She moved faster than I had ever seen her move, fueled by the pure white-hot energy of a woman scorned. Chase's smile faltered as he saw her coming, saw the look on her face, saw the murder in her eyes. "What is wrong, babe? What happened?" "You bastard!" she screamed, launching herself at him. She didn't slap him. She punched him a solid right hook that connected with his jaw, sending him stumbling back against the railing. "You sold me out. You told them it was me you tried to send me to jail." Chase looked confused for a split second. Then he realized the house was wired. He looked down at me standing by the stereo, and he knew. "Nia, wait!" he shouted, putting his hands up to defend himself. "It was a trick. I was just saying that to get them off our backs. I didn't mean it. Baby, I love you." "Liar," she shrieked, clawing at his face, ripping his shirt. "You wanted the money. You wanted to run away with it. You wanted to leave me here to rot." They fell to the floor, rolling around on the expensive carpet, tearing at each other. It was ugly. It was violent, and it was inevitable. The alliance of greed had shattered, and now they were just two rats in a sack fighting for the last breath of air. I watched them from the bottom of the stairs, leaning on my cane. I didn't feel joy exactly, but I felt a grim satisfaction. This was justice, poetic and raw. They were destroying each other, doing my work for me. Chase managed to push her off. He scrambled to his feet, bleeding from a scratch on his cheek. "Get away from me, you crazy bitch," he yelled, kicking at her. "I should have left you months ago. You are useless. You are a dead weight. I never loved you. I loved the checkbook." Nia lay on the floor, panting, her hair wild, her eyes wide with the shock of the truth finally being spoken out loud. "Get out," she whispered. "Get out of my house." "It is not your house," Chase spat, straightening his torn shirt. "It is the bank's house, and soon it will be mine. I made a deal, Nia. I am walking away, and you are going down for attempted murder. Enjoy prison, sweetheart." He turned to go back into the study, probably to lock himself in until the police arrived, but Nia wasn't done. She reached out and grabbed his ankle, tripping him. He fell hard, hitting his face on the doorframe. "You are not going anywhere," she hissed, crawling on top of him. "You are going down with me, Chase. If I burn, you burn, we burn together." I turned away, walking back toward the kitchen, leaving them to their war. I had heard enough. I had seen enough. The family was dead, killed not by poison, but by the truth. I poured myself a glass of water, my hand steady, my mind clear. Let them fight. Let them tear the house down around their ears tomorrow. The bill collector was coming, and he wouldn't care whose side of the story was true. He would only care about the payment, and neither of them had it. I took a sip of water and looked out the window at the gathering dusk. The storm was here, and I was the eye calm still and watching the destruction unfold. The living room was a battlefield of broken glass and shattered egos, but the war wasn't over. It was merely paused by the arrival of a bigger threat. Chase's phone rang, the harsh, jagged ringtone cutting through the silence like a knife. He looked at the screen, his face draining of color. It was the Ivanovs. He didn't answer. He just let it ring, the sound vibrating against the hardwood floor. Nia, still on the floor, nursing her bruised hip, looked up at him with wide, terrified eyes. The fight had gone out of them both, replaced by the cold, hard reality of survival. They were no longer enemies. They were accomplices on a sinking ship. "They are coming," Chase whispered, his voice hollow. "They said if I didn't pay the interest by noon, they were sending a team. Not to collect, to make an example." Nia scrambled to her feet, wincing. "We need money, Chase. Real money. Fast. What about the warehouse, the one in Decatur? You said it was full of surplus parts. Dad hasn't been there in years. We could sell the inventory. Quick liquidation." Chase looked at her, his eyes lighting up with the desperate hope of a drowning man. "The parts inventory? Yes. It's off the books, mostly. Or at least the old man's tracking system is so archaic no one would notice a few crates missing. But we need a buyer. Someone who pays cash and doesn't ask questions." "I know a guy," Nia said, wiping blood from her lip. "From when I was trying to source cheap materials for the boutique. He buys distressed assets. No paperwork, just cash." I sat in my corner chair, my head bowed, listening to them plot their next felony. They thought they were being clever. They didn't know that the guy, Nia knew, was actually a front man for one of my oldest competitors, a man who owed me a favor from back in '98 when I bailed his son out of a jam. I had set this trap months ago just in case. Chase paced the room, energized by the prospect of a quick fix. "Call him. Tell him we have a warehouse full of high-grade transmission parts, engine blocks, the works. Tell him we need to move it tonight. Cash on the barrel head." Nia nodded, pulling out her phone. She dialed a number, her voice trembling as she made the pitch. I watched her, a mix of pity and disgust churning in my gut. She was selling her father's sweat and blood for pennies on the dollar to save a man who had just tried to sell her out. An hour later, a black SUV pulled into the driveway. A man stepped out, thick-necked, wearing a cheap suit and sunglasses, even though it was overcast. He carried a briefcase. This was Vinny, my plant. Chase met him at the door, trying to project authority despite his torn shirt and bruised face. "You brought the cash. I brought an offer," Vinny grunted, pushing past him into the foyer. He looked around the wrecked living room with a sneer. "Nice place. Looks like you had a party." "Cut the small talk," Chase snapped. "We have inventory, grade A commercial truck parts. Market value is easily $200,000. We'll let it go for $150, cash, today." Vinny laughed, a harsh barking sound. "$150? You think I'm stupid? I know who owns that warehouse. Luther Banks. And I don't see Luther Banks here. I see his son-in-law looking like he just went 10 rounds with a lawnmower. This is hot merchandise. Stolen goods. It is not stolen, Nia interjected, stepping forward. I am his daughter. I have authorization. He is sick. We are liquidating assets to pay for his care. Vinny looked at me sitting in the corner, staring blankly at the wall. That him, the great Luther Banks, looks like a vegetable. He is incapacitated, Chase said quickly. We have power of attorney. It's all legal. Show me the paper, Vinny demanded. Chase froze. The power of attorney I had signed was fake, signed Betty, and currently sitting in a biohazard bin at the hospital. They had nothing. The paperwork is with the lawyers, Chase stammered. But we can sign a bill of sale, a personal guarantee. Look, do you want the parts or not? Vinny looked at them, letting the silence stretch. He was enjoying this. I'll take the parts, but not for 150, not for 100. 20,000. Take it or leave it. 20,000? Chase screamed. That's robbery. Those parts are worth 10 times that. Then sell them to someone else, Vinny said, turning to leave. Oh wait, you can't. Because you don't have the title, you don't have the time, and you have some very scary people breathing down your neck. I heard about the Ivanovs, Chase. Word gets around. Chase went pale. He looked at Naya. They were trapped. 20,000 wouldn't pay the Ivanovs, but it might buy them plane tickets. It might buy them a head start. Fine, Chase whispered, defeated. 20,000. Cash. Now. Vinny smirked. He opened the briefcase, revealing stacks of used bills. Sign here. He pulled out a document. It wasn't a napkin scribbled with a promise. It was a formal bill of sale transferring ownership of all inventory located at Warehouse B to Vinny's Salvage LLC. It required a signature from the authorized representative of Banks Trans. Chase grabbed the pen. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look at Naya. He signed Luther Banks in a shaky, forged scrawl that looked nothing like my signature. Done, Chase said, shoving the paper at Vinny and grabbing the cash. Vinny checked the signature, folded the paper, and slipped it into his jacket pocket. Pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Banks. He walked out, leaving them with a pile of dirty money and a document that was about to become a prison sentence. Chase started counting the cash, his hands shaking. It's not enough, he muttered. It's not enough to pay them off, but it's enough to run. We leave tonight. We go to Mexico. We can figure it out from there. Naya looked at him, her eyes dead. Mexico with 20 grand, Chase, that won't last us 3 months. It's better than being dead, Chase yelled, stuffing the money into his pockets. Pack a bag. We are leaving in 10 minutes. Forget the old man. Leave him here. The cops will find him eventually. They scrambled upstairs, leaving me alone in the living room. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my burner phone. I sent a single text to Cohen. He signed. Embezzlement, fraud, forgery. It's done. Vinny wasn't just a buyer. He was a witness. And that bill of sale wasn't just a receipt, it was a confession. By signing my name to sell company assets he didn't own, Chase had crossed the line from civil dispute to federal crime. He had stolen from a corporation. He had committed interstate commerce fraud. I stood up, my joints popping. I walked over to the window and watched Vinny's SUV drive away. The trap was sprung. The cage door had slammed shut. Chase came running down the stairs a few minutes later, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. Naya followed, dragging a suitcase looking like a ghost. Let's go, Chase barked, heading for the back door. We'll take the service road, avoid the cameras. They rushed past me without a glance. I was just furniture to them, a discarded prop in their tragedy. But as Chase reached for the doorknob, a loud, booming knock echoed from the front entrance. Boom, boom, boom. It wasn't the knock of a visitor. It was the knock of authority. Chase froze. Don't answer it, he whispered, eyes wide. Police, open up, a voice shouted from outside. Chase dropped the bag. No, 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 no. How we just did the deal. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time he saw something in my eyes that wasn't senility. He saw the steel. He saw the cold, hard calculation of a man who had been 3 steps ahead of him the whole time. You, he breathed. You set this up. I didn't say a word. I just pointed my cane at the door. The door burst open. It wasn't the police. Not yet. It was Jamal, flanked by two massive men in dark suits. My private security. Going somewhere. Mr. Miller, Jamal asked, a smirk playing on his lips. Mr. Banks has a meeting scheduled. And I believe you're the guest of honor. Chase backed away, reaching for his waistband like he had a gun, but he had nothing. Nia screamed as the security guards moved in. Sit down, I said, my voice clear and commanding, dropping the act completely. Both of you, the party is just getting started. Chase stared at me, his mouth hanging open. The realization hit him like a freight train. The old man wasn't crazy. The old man wasn't helpless. The old man was the one pulling the strings. You, Chase stammered. You're not sick, I finished for him. No, but you are about to be. I sat down in my armchair, crossing my legs. Jamal, bring in the projector. I want to show them some home movies before the cops get here. The living room was quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavy, like the air before a tornado touches down. Chase was pacing back and forth, his shoes clicking on the hardwood floor, a manic rhythm that matched the desperate look in his eyes. He had been on the phone for hours, whispering, shouting, begging. He was a man running out of road and the cliff edge was coming up fast. I sat in my wheelchair by the window, a blanket over my legs, looking for all the world like a man who had given up the ghost. I watched him with the dull, glassy stare I had perfected over the last few days, but inside my mind was sharp, clear, and calculating. Nia was sitting on the sofa, her head in her hands. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. The fight had drained out of her, leaving only fear. She knew the walls were closing in. She knew the Ivanovs were not the kind of men who accepted excuses. She knew that without money, they were as good as dead. Chase suddenly stopped pacing, a wide, terrifying grin spreading across his face. He hung up the phone and turned to Nia, his eyes bright with a feverish hope that made my skin crawl. I did it, he whispered, his voice cracking with excitement. I found him. I found the buyer. Nia looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and hopeless. What are you talking about, Chase? Who? Sterling Capital. Chase said the name like it was a prayer. I got a meeting with Marcus Sterling, the shark of the South. He buys distressed assets, he buys companies that are bleeding, and he turns them around. He is in town for one night only, and he agreed to see us, Nia. He agreed to buy Banks Trans. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from smiling, Marcus. Sterling was a legend in Atlanta. Business circles, a ruthless corporate raider who ate family businesses for breakfast. He was also completely fictional. Or at least the version Chase was talking to was the man Chase had just spoken to wasn't a billionaire investor. He was Reginald, a character actor. I had hired 3 days ago a man who usually played judges and doctors in local theater productions. I had paid him $5,000 to play the role of a lifetime, and judging by Chase's reaction, Reginald was earning every penny. Chase rushed over to Nia, pulling her up from the sofa. Listen to me, baby. This is it. The exit strategy he offered, $300 million, cash buyout, immediate wire transfer. As soon as the papers are signed, we take the money, we pay off the Russians, and we have enough left over to live like kings in Brazil. We are saved. Nia, we are saved. Nia looked at him. Hope, warring with skepticism. $300 million, but Chase, Dad has to sign. The company is in his name. He will never sign it. Not after everything. Not after the poison. Chase's face darkened, the manic joy replaced by a cold, predatory resolve. He looked over at me, sitting in my wheelchair, staring at dust motes in the sunlight. He walked over to me, looming over my chair, casting a shadow that felt cold. He will sign, Chase said, his voice low and dangerous. He doesn't have a choice. Look at him. Nia. He is barely there. The dementia is taking over. He is weak. He is confused. He leaned down, his face inches from mine. I could smell the stale coffee and the fear on his breath. Luther, he said loudly like he was talking to a child. Do you hear me? We are going to have a party. A big party tomorrow night to celebrate your retirement. I blinked slowly, letting my head loll to the side. A little party. I mumbled, my voice raspy and weak. Betty loves parties. Is there going to be cake? Chase looked back at Nia, a cruel smirk twisting his lips. See, his brain is mush. He thinks his dead wife is coming to dinner tomorrow night. We invite Sterling here. We set up a signing ceremony. We tell everyone it is a farewell party for the great Luther Banks. We drug him, Nia, just a little, just enough to make him compliant. We put the pen in his hand and we guide it across the paper. He won't even know what he is doing. Nia hesitated, looking at me with a flicker of guilt. But then she thought about the debts. She thought about the threats, and the guilt vanished, replaced by survival instinct. "You think it will work?" she asked softly. "It has to work," Chase snapped. "It is the only play we have left. We drug him. We get the signature. Sterling wires the money, and we are gone. Before anyone realizes the old man didn't know what he was signing. By the time he wakes up, we will be on a beach in Rio, and he will be the state S problem." I listened to them plot my demise, to them plan to strip me of my life's work. And I felt a strange sense of calm. They were walking right into the trap. The door was open. The cheese was on the trigger, and they were hungry. Reginald had his instructions. The contract they were so excited about was a work of art drafted by Cohen, full of loopholes and clauses that would hang them. But the best part was the venue. They wanted a party. Fine, I would give them a party they would never forget. That evening, Chase was in a frenzy of activity. He was ordering catering, hiring a cleaning crew, trying to turn the house back into a showpiece. He was calling his few remaining friends, trying to fill the room to make it look legitimate. He wanted witnesses. He wanted an audience for his triumph. He didn't know he was gathering a jury. He came into the guest room where I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. He had a glass of water and a pill in his hand. Another sedative, another chemical leash. "Here, Luther, take this. It will help you rest for the big day tomorrow," Chase said, his voice fake and solicitous. I sat up, my movements slow and pained. I looked at the pill, then at him. I reached out and took it, my hand trembling. I put it in my mouth and took a sip of water, pretending to swallow, tucking the pill into my cheek just like I had done a dozen times before. Chase watched me closely, his eyes narrowing, making sure. "Good," he said, satisfied. "Now, listen, old man, tomorrow is important. You are going to be on your best behavior. You are going to smile. You are going to shake hands, and when I tell you to sign, you are going to sign. Do you understand me, or do I need to explain it to you with a belt?" I looked at him, letting my lower lip quiver, letting a tear leak out of the corner of my eye. "I am tired, Chase," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I am so tired of fighting. I just want to rest. I just want to go home to Betty." Chase smiled, a genuine smile, this time the smile of a man who thinks he has finally broken a wild horse. "That is right, Luther," he said, patting my shoulder condescendingly. "You are tired. You have worked hard your whole life. It is time to let go tomorrow. You sign the papers, and then you can rest forever. You can go be with Betty. We will take care of everything." He turned and walked out, turning off the light, leaving me in the darkness. He thought he had won. He thought I was surrendering. He didn't understand what I meant. I spit the pill into my hand and tossed it into the trash. I wasn't tired of fighting. I was just getting started. I wanted to rest, yes, but not in a grave and not in a state home. I wanted to rest, knowing that the parasites who had fed on me were gone, crushed under the weight of their own greed. I lay back in the darkness, my mind racing. Tomorrow night the house would be full. Chase would be preening. Nia would be playing the dutiful daughter, and Reginald would be playing the shark, and I would be the old man in the wheelchair, the prop, until the moment I stood up. I reached under the mattress and pulled out the burner phone. One last time I sent a single text to Jamal. "Green light, tell the team to be ready at 8 o'clock, bring the special equipment." I put the phone away and closed my eyes, visualizing the plan step by step. Every move had to be perfect. Every line delivered with conviction. Chase wanted a signature he wanted to sign away, my legacy. Well, tomorrow night he was going to get a signature, all right, but it wouldn't be on a sales contract, it would be on a confession. The next morning the house was buzzing. Caterers were setting up tables in the backyard. A string quartet was tuning their instruments in the foyer. Chase had gone all out, spending money he didn't have, expecting the payout to cover it all. He was wearing a new tuxedo, looking sharp, looking rich, looking like the CEO he desperately wanted to be. Naya was in a gown, looking pale but determined. She was avoiding me, unable to look me in the eye. They dressed me in an old suit, one that was a little too big, making me look frail and shrunken. They sat me in the wheelchair in the corner of the living room like a decoration. Guests started arriving, people I didn't know. Friends of Chase S., people who came for the free champagne and the spectacle. They looked at me with pity, whispering behind their hands, "Poor Luther Banks. Look at him. He is gone." Chase worked the room, shaking hands, laughing, playing the host he was high on. Adrenaline, high on the prospect of $300 million. He kept glancing at the door, waiting for the guest of honor, waiting for Marcus Sterling. At 7:30, a black limousine pulled into the driveway. A hush fell over the room. The door opened and Reginald stepped out. He looked magnificent. He was wearing a three-piece suit that cost more than Chase's car. He walked with a cane, not because he needed it, but because it made him look powerful. He had silver hair and a gaze that could cut glass. He swept into the room, his presence sucking the air out of the space. Chase rushed over, practically bowing. "Mr. Sterling, welcome to my home. Thank you for coming." Reginald looked at him, looking him up and down with a sneer of dismissal. "Nice place, Mr. Miller, a bit gaudy for my taste, but to each his own. Where is the principal? Where is Luther Banks?" Chase pointed at me. "Right here." "Mr. Sterling, he is resting, getting ready for the big moment." Reginald walked over to me. He stood in front of my wheelchair, looking down at me with a look of profound respect. Chase didn't see the wink he gave me, just a subtle twitch of the eyelid. "Mr. Banks," Reginald boomed, his voice projecting like he was on stage. "It is an honor, sir. I have heard stories about you, about how you built this company with your bare hands. Legendary, truly legendary." I stared up at him, letting my mouth hang open a little. "Who are you?" I mumbled. "Are you the tax man?" Chase laughed nervously, stepping in. "Sorry, Mr. Sterling. He is having a bad day. The medication, you know, but he is lucid enough to sign. He knows what is best for the family." Reginald nodded slowly, playing along very well. "Let us get this done. I have a plane to catch to Tokyo in the morning. Bring the papers." Chase snapped his fingers and Naya hurried over with the leather folder the contract was inside along with the pen. I watched her hands shake as she set it down on the table in front of me. "This is it," Chase said, his voice trembling with excitement. "Just sign here, Luther, right on the line, and it is all over. $300 million. Think of what we can do. Think of the rest you will get." I looked at the paper. The letters were blurring, not because of my eyes, but because of the tears I was holding back. This was my life on that paper, 40 years of blood and sweat, and he wanted to sell it for a plane ticket to Rio. I reached for the pen, my hand shaking violently. Chase grabbed my wrist, steadying it, guiding it toward the paper. "Right here," he whispered, his breath hot in my ear. "Just write your name. Luther, just write it and you can go to sleep." I felt the cold plastic of the pen. I felt the pressure of his hand forcing mine down. I looked at the paper, then I looked up at him. I looked into the eyes of the man who tried to kill me, the man who beat my daughter, the man who stole my life. "I am tired, Chase," I said, my voice suddenly clear. "Steady, strong, tired of you." I ripped my hand away from his grasp with a strength that shocked him. I grabbed the pen, and instead of signing, I stabbed it into the table, the nib burying deep into the wood. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. Chase jumped back, staring at me. What are you doing?" "Sign the paper." I stood up, pushing the wheelchair back. It rolled away, crashing into a table of hors d'oeuvres. I stood tall, straightening my spine, buttoning my jacket. I wasn't shaking anymore. I wasn't confused. I was Luther Banks, and I was done playing games. "No," I thundered, my voice filling the room, silencing the music, silencing the chatter. "No, I will not sign, I will not sell, and I will not let you take one more dime from this family." Chase looked around, panic rising in his eyes. He looked at Reginald, expecting the shark to be angry, expecting the deal to collapse. But Reginald was smiling, a slow applause starting from his hands. "Bravo." Luther, Reginald said, dropping the accent, dropping the act. "Bravo. What a performance." Chase looked from him to me, his face draining of color. "What is going on? Who are you?" I walked toward Chase, my steps heavy and sure. "He is an actor, Chase," I said, stopping inches from his face, "and I am the director. And this isn't a retirement party, it is an eviction notice." Chase stumbled back, knocking into Nia. She looked at me, her hands over her mouth, realizing finally that the old man wasn't senile, that the old man had been watching the whole time. I signaled to the back of the room where Jamal was standing by the curtain. He pulled a cord and a massive projection screen dropped down from the ceiling, covering the stolen painting. "Roll it, Jamal," I said. The projector hummed to life, and suddenly the wall was filled with images. Chase pouring the powder. Chase snorting lines of coke off his desk. Chase texting his mistress, promising her my money, promising to leave Nia behind. The room erupted in gasps. People were pointing, whispering, taking photos. Chase stared at the screen, his life unspooling in high definition, his secrets laid bare for the world to see. "You wanted a signature." "Chase," I asked, my voice cold as the grave. "Well, you are going to get one on a confession." The party was over, the real show had just begun. 2 hours before the curtain was set to rise on the final act of this tragedy, I was not cowering in the mildewed guest room of my stolen estate. I was sitting in the presidential suite of the Four Seasons Hotel, watching a stranger disappear in the mirror, and a king re-emerge the barber, a man named Silas who had been cutting my hair since I owned 3 trucks. In a dream, snapped the cape off my neck with a sharp crack that sounded like a whip. I stood up and ran a hand over my chin, smooth for the first time in a week. The gray stubble of the senile, confused old man was gone, washed down the drain along with the weakness I had worn like a costume. The man staring back at me had eyes like cold flint and a jaw set in stone. I stepped into the trousers of a $10,000 bespoke tuxedo, silk and wool, tailored to within an inch of its life. It fit like armor, restricting nothing, hiding everything. I fastened the studs on my shirt, feeling the cool metal against my skin, each click a round being chambered in a weapon. Getting out of the house had been embarrassingly easy. Chase and Nia were so blinded by the glare of $300 million that they had stopped looking at the shadows. They didn't notice the laundry van that pulled up to the service entrance an hour ago. They didn't notice that the driver wasn't the usual delivery boy, but Big Mike, my head of security, who could bench press a Buick. I had walked out the back door, hidden inside a rolling laundry cart, right under their noses, past the kitchen where they were arguing about which private jet service to use for their escape to Brazil. Now I checked my watch, the heavy gold Rolex that Nia thought she had seen drowning in a vase of dead flowers. It was 6:00. The sun was dipping below the Atlanta skyline, painting the city in bruised purples and blood reds. It was time. My phone buzzed on the marble vanity. It was Jamal. He was the general on the ground. Now the skinny kid who cleared tables was now clearing the board. I opened the message. "Mr. Banks, the perimeter is secure. The package has been delivered. The rats are still in the cage." I smiled, a thin, humorless expression that didn't reach my eyes. Jamal and my private security team had spent the last hour executing a maneuver that would have made a special ops commander proud. They had intercepted the catering company. Chase had hired a high-end firm that catered to the Buckhead elite, a generous buyout fee and a non-disclosure agreement later. And the legitimate waiters were sent home with a paid night off. In their place stood my men. Every bartender polishing a glass, every valet parking a car, every waiter holding a tray of crab cakes was a trained private security contractor on my personal payroll. They weren't there to serve hors d'oeuvres. They were there to ensure that once the doors closed, nobody left until I said so. The house that Chase thought was his fortress was now a prison, and the guards were already inside. I picked up my tablet, tapping into the security feed from the living room. Hidden cameras installed by Jamal earlier that day gave me a high-definition view of the enemy camp. The house looked spectacular, flowers everywhere, music playing, softly lighting, dimmed to a romantic glow. It was the perfect setting for a victory lap. Chase and Nia were in the kitchen, leaning against the granite island that still bore the crack from Chase's fist. They were holding crystal flutes of champagne, drinking the good stuff, vintage Dom Perignon that I had been saving for my 50th wedding anniversary. They had popped the cork without a second thought, celebrating a heist they hadn't even finished pulling off. Chase looked manic, his eyes bright and feverish. He adjusted his bow tie, looking at his reflection in the oven door. "We did it, babe," he said, his voice echoing slightly over the audio feed. "We actually did it tomorrow morning. We are on a plane, and the old man is someone else's problem." Nia took a long swallow of champagne, her hand trembling slightly. She looked pale, the bruises on her face covered by layers of expensive makeup, but the fear was still there, lurking behind her eyes. "Are you sure he is out?" "Chase," she asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. "What if he wakes up during the signing? What if he starts talking about the poison again?" Chase laughed, a harsh barking sound that made me grip the edge of the vanity. "He is not waking up." "Nia, I gave him a double dose of the sedative. He is out cold. He wouldn't wake up if the house was on fire. I checked on him 10 minutes ago. He is curled up under the blanket, snoring away. He is a vegetable. Nia, a rich vegetable ready for harvest." I watched them on the screen, feeling a cold fire burning in my gut. They were so confident, so arrogant, they had walked into the guest room, looked at the lump under the covers and seen exactly what they wanted to see. That was the masterpiece of the deception. The final insult lying in the twin bed under the thin, scratchy blanket wasn't Luther Banks. It was 3 king-sized pillows stuffed into one of my old flannel shirts topped with a wig I had bought online weeks ago from the doorway in the dim light. It looked exactly like a frail, broken man curled up in defeat. They hadn't even bothered to check a pulse. They hadn't bothered to look at the face. They just saw the shape of an old man and assumed they had won. "Let us drink to Rio Chase," said, raising his glass to us, baby, to the good life. They clinked glasses, the crystal ringing with a pure, clear note that sounded like a death knell. They were celebrating their brilliance while a mile away the man they thought they had broken was adjusting his cufflinks, diamonds, real ones this time, not the glass I let Nia steal, and preparing to burn their world to the ground. I put the tablet down and picked up my cane. Not because I needed it to walk, I felt stronger than I had in 20 years, fueled by the adrenaline of the hunt, but because the cane had a heavy brass head in the shape of a lion, and I liked the way it felt in my hand, a scepter for a king returning to reclaim his throne. Cohen stepped into the room holding my overcoat. He looked nervous, sweating slightly in his suit. "Luther, are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice tight. "We have the evidence. We have the fraud, the theft, the attempted murder. We could just call the police right now, have them arrested before the first guest arrives. Why go through with the charade?" I turned to him, my eyes hard. "No, Police Cohen. Not yet arrest is too easy. Jail is too clean. They tried to take my dignity. They tried to take my mind. They tried to make me question my own sanity in my own house. I want them to feel that I want them to stand in front of the people they tried to impress and watch their lies crumble. I want to see the hope die in their eyes before the handcuffs go on." Cohen nodded, understanding that this wasn't a legal strategy. It was an exorcism. "The car is waiting," he said. I walked to the elevator, my shoes clicking on the marble floor, a steady, rhythmic march to war. I thought about Nia, the little girl who used to sit on my lap and ask for stories about the road. I thought about the woman who poured poison into my wine because she wanted a villa in Brazil. I didn't feel sadness anymore. I didn't feel grief. I felt only the cold clarity of a balance sheet that needed to be reconciled. We rode down in silence, the elevator descending like a diving bell into the pressure of the deep. I stepped out into the cool night air, the wind whipping my coat around my legs. The limousine was waiting black and sleek like a hearse for the living. I slid into the back seat, the leather cool against my skin. "To the house," I told the driver, as we pulled away from the hotel, merging into the flow of traffic. I looked out at the city. One last time, the streetlights blurred into streaks of gold and red, reminding me of the long haul drives of my youth. Endless nights on the interstate, just me and the road, and the cargo moving forward, always forward, never looking back. Chase thought he was the driver now. He thought he had the wheel, but he didn't know the brakes were cut. He didn't know the bridge was out. He was accelerating toward a cliff, celebrating the speed while I held the map. I pulled out my burner phone one last time and sent a single text to Jamal. "Showtime." The reply came back, instant and grim. "Guests are arriving, the stage is set." I leaned back in the seat, closing my eyes, visualizing the next hour step by step. The entry, the reveal, the look on Chase S. face when the dead man walked, the look on Nia S. face when she realized her pillow dummy couldn't sign a check. They wanted a party. They wanted a celebration of my end. Well, I was going to give them one hell of a show. But when the curtain fell, there would be no applause, only the sound of steel bracelets snapping shut, and the silence of a legacy reclaimed. "Drive faster," I whispered to the darkness. "I don't want to miss the toast." The limousine idled in the shadows at the end of the long driveway, the engine humming a low vibration that I could feel through the leather seats. I watched the house through the tinted glass, glowing like a lantern in the dark Georgia night. It looked warm, inviting a beacon of hospitality, but I knew better. Inside that house, the air was toxic, thick with greed and desperation. From my vantage point, I could see the cars arriving, a parade of expensive metal rolling up to witness the execution of my legacy. I tapped the screen of the tablet resting on my knee, switching between the hidden camera feeds Jamal had set up. The living room was filling up fast. Chase had managed to pull a crowd. I had to give him credit for that, even if half of them were there to watch him fail and the other half were there to break his legs. I saw the Ivanov brothers walk in. They did not look like the other guests. They wore suits that cost money but fit poorly, straining across shoulders built for violence. They didn't take the champagne offered by my undercover security guards posing as waiters. They just stood by the wall, eyes scanning the room, not looking at the art, but looking for exits and looking at Chase like a piece of meat they hadn't decided how to cook. Yet they were the vultures circling the carcass, waiting for the smell of death. Then there were the lawyers, the bottom feeders Chase had dredged up from the swamp men with cheap smiles and cheaper ethics, clutching briefcases that I knew contained the fraudulent transfer documents. They were laughing, clinking glasses, thinking they were about to get a slice of a $300 million pie. They didn't know the pie was poisoned. And in the center of it all was Reginald, my hired actor, playing the role of Marcus Sterling to perfection. He sat in my favorite wingback chair swirling a glass of scotch, looking bored and dangerous, checking his watch every 30 seconds, ramping up the pressure. Chase was orbiting him like a nervous satellite, sweating through his tuxedo, trying to keep the conversation flowing, trying to keep the illusion alive. I watched Chase on the screen. He looked manic, his movements jerky and erratic. He laughed too loud at jokes that weren't funny. He kept touching his nose, a nervous tick. Or maybe the residue of something chemical he had snorted to get through the night. He clapped a hand on Reginald S.'s shoulder a little too hard, and I saw Reginald flinch just a fraction, a professional reaction to a desperate amateur. "Ladies and gentlemen," Chase called out, tapping a spoon against his crystal flute, the sound cutting through the chatter like a knife demanding attention. "Can I have everyone's attention, please?" The room went quiet. The Ivanovs stopped scanning the room and locked their dead eyes on Chase. The lawyers stopped whispering. Nia stood by the staircase, clutching her elbows, looking like she was about to be sick. She knew what was coming. She knew the lie she had to sell. "Thank you all for coming tonight." Chase continued, his voice booming, filled with a false bravado that made my stomach turn. "Tonight is a historic night for this family and for the city of Atlanta, as many of you know. My father-in-law, Luther Banks, is a titan of industry, a man who built an empire from asphalt and grit." He paused for effect, looking around the room, expecting applause. He got a few polite claps, but mostly just silence. The air in the room was heavy, waiting for the drop. But as we all know, time waits for no man. Chase said, his voice dropping to a somber register that was so fake it was almost impressive. "Luther has been struggling lately. His health, his mind. It is not what it used to be. It breaks my heart to see such a strong man reduced to confusion and frailty. He forgets names. He gets lost in his own house. He needs rest. He needs peace." I watched from the car, my hands gripping the head of my lion cane so hard my knuckles turned white. He was eulogizing me while I was still breathing, painting a picture of a broken old man to justify his theft. "That is why tonight we are making it official," Chase announced, puffing out his chest. "Tonight, Luther is stepping down. He is passing the torch to the next generation to ensure that Banks Trans continues to thrive. He has agreed to sell the company to Sterling Capital, a move that will secure his legacy and his care for the rest of his days." There was a murmur in the room. The lawyers nodded approvingly. The Ivanovs just stared, unblinking, calculating their cut. Reginald stood up, buttoning his jacket, the shark smelling blood in the water. A moving speech, Mr. Miller. Reginald said, his voice projecting clearly over the audio feed. "But I am on a tight schedule. My jet is waiting on the tarmac at Hartsfield. I need the signature, and I need it now. Bring out Mr. Banks." Chase nodded eagerly, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Of course, Mr. Sterling immediately." "Nia, go get your father. Bring him out here gently, remember? He is fragile." I saw Nia flinch on the screen. She looked at Chase with wide, terrified eyes. She didn't want to go into that room. She didn't want to see the drugged lump in the bed. She wanted this to be over. She wanted the money without the guilt. But she had no choice. She was in too deep. "I will go get him," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the feed. I signaled the driver now. The limousine rolled forward, the gravel crunching softly under the tires as we approached the front steps of the mansion. I watched on the tablet as Nia walked down the hallway, her steps slow and heavy like she was walking to the gallows. She reached the guest room door, my prison cell for the last week, and turned the handle. I put the tablet down and picked up my cane, checking the weight of it, feeling the solid brass lion head against my palm. I buttoned my tuxedo jacket, smoothing the lapels. I wasn't an old trucker anymore. I wasn't a victim. I was the CEO of a multi-million-dollar empire, and I was about to fire my entire family. Inside the house, Nia pushed the door open. The room was dark, smelling of stale air and the pizza Jamal had delivered the night before. She walked toward the bed where the shape of a man lay curled under the thin blanket. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Wake up, Daddy. It is time to sign the papers. Come on, get up." The lump in the bed didn't move. Nia reached out her hand, shaking. She touched the shoulder of the figure. "Daddy, please, Chase is waiting. We need you to just come out and sign, and then you can sleep forever." She shook the figure harder. The pillow shifted. The wig I had bought online slid off, revealing the cotton stuffing underneath. Nia gasped, pulling the blanket back violently, revealing the pile of pillows stuffed into my old flannel shirt. There was no body. There was no Luther Banks, just a scarecrow made of laundry. Nia screamed. It wasn't a scream of fear. It was a scream of pure, unadulterated terror. A sound that shattered the tension in the living room like a glass thrown against a wall. She stumbled back, knocking over the nightstand, the lamp crashing to the floor. "He is gone," she shrieked, her voice echoing down the hallway, hitting the party guests like a physical blow. "He is gone. Chase. He is not here. He escaped." In the living room, Chase froze his glass of champagne halfway to his mouth. His eyes went wide, the color draining from his face faster than water down a drain. "What do you mean he is gone?" he shouted, looking toward the hallway, panic cracking his voice. The Ivanovs stepped forward, their hands reaching into their jackets, not for phones but for steel. The lawyers looked at each other, sensing a disaster. Reginald checked his watch, a small smile playing on his lips. He knew his cue was coming. "He tricked us!" Nia screamed, running into the living room, her face a mask of hysteria. "He is not in the room. It is just pillows. Chase, he has been gone. He knows. He knows everything." Chase looked around the room, looking for a way out, looking for an explanation, looking for someone to blame. He looked at the Ivanovs, who were now blocking the kitchen exit. He looked at the front door. "Find him!" he roared, spitting foam. "Find the old bastard. He cannot have gone far. He can barely walk without that cane. Search the ground, search the bushes." He was losing control. The facade was crumbling, revealing the scared little boy underneath. The chaos was bubbling up. Voices raised in confusion and alarm. The party was turning into a riot. That was my cue. I opened the door of the limousine and stepped out onto the driveway. The night air was cool on my face. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the scent of pine and gasoline and impending justice. Jamal was waiting by the front door, flanked by 4 of my biggest security guards, men who looked like they ate concrete for breakfast. "Open it," I said, my voice calm, steady. Jamal pushed the double front doors open. They swung wide, revealing the tableau of panic inside. The sound of the heavy doors hitting the stops was like a thunderclap, silencing the room instantly. Everyone turned, Chase, Nia, the mobsters, the lawyers, all eyes locked on the doorway. I stepped across the threshold. I didn't shuffle, I didn't drag my feet, I didn't lean on the cane for support. I held it loosely at my side, a symbol of authority, not infirmity. I stood tall, my shoulders back, my head high, wearing the tuxedo like armor. My eyes swept the room, locking onto Chase, who was standing by the fireplace, looking like he was seeing a ghost. For a long moment, nobody moved, nobody breathed. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the thudding of 100 hearts. "You were looking for me, son," I said, my voice deep and resonant, filling the cavernous foyer without a tremor, without a stutter, without a trace of the dementia they had pinned on me. Chase took a step back, knocking over a vase, his hands shaking violently. "Luther," he whispered, his voice barely a squeak. "But you were in bed. I gave you the pills." I walked into the room, my security team fanning out behind me, creating a wall of muscle and dark suits that separated the guests from the door. The Ivanovs looked at my men, then at me, and they stayed put, recognizing a superior force when they saw one. I spit them out. "Chase," I said, walking toward him step by step, relentless. "Just like you should have spit out your greed, but you swallowed it, didn't you? You swallowed it all. Hook, line, and sinker." I stopped in the center of the room, looking around at the decorations, at the food I paid for, at the people drinking my champagne in my house. Nia was cowering behind the sofa, her hands over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She looked at me, and she didn't see her father. She saw Judgment Day. "You said I was frail, Chase," I continued, my voice rising, cutting through the air like a siren. "You said I was confused. You said I needed to rest. Well, look at me, son. Do I look tired to you?" I raised my arms, the cufflinks catching the light. Do I look confused? Chase shook his head, unable to speak, terrified beyond measure. I didn't think so, I said, lowering my arms and gripping the cane tight. I look like the man who built this company from the ground up while you were still learning how to tie your shoes. And tonight I am not here to retire. I am here to clean house. Chase looked at the screen that was still lowered, covering the stolen painting. He looked at Reginald, who was now standing next to me, looking like my consigliere. He looked at the Ivanovs, who were looking at him like a meal ticket that had just expired. But the deal, Chase stammered, desperate, clinging to the last shred of his delusion, the money sterling the sale. I laughed a harsh, dry sound. There is no sale, Chase, I said, signaling Jamal. Jamal handed me a remote control. I pointed it at the projector. There never was. I pressed the button. The room was vibrating with a tension so thick it felt like the air had been replaced with gasoline, and Chase Miller was standing in the center of it holding a lit match. He looked at me, standing tall in my tuxedo. He looked at the security guards blocking the exits, and he looked at the projection screen that had descended like a guillotine blade behind him. For a moment, his brain simply refused to process the new reality. He blinked, rapid shutter-like movements, trying to clear the image of the strong, lucid man standing before him and replace it with the feeble invalid he needed me to be. "Dad," he croaked, his voice cracking like dry wood. "Dad, what are you doing? Stop this nonsense. You are confusing everyone. Look. Mr. Sterling is waiting. The lawyers are waiting. Just come over here and sit down. You are having an episode that is all it is. Just a bad episode. Take the pen, sign the papers, and we can get you back to bed." He reached out with the pen again, that expensive Mont Blanc he had bought with my money, thrusting it toward me like a talisman that could ward off evil. He was sweating profusely now, thick rivulets running down his temples, ruining his makeup, staining his collar. He was trying to force the world back into the shape he wanted through sheer willpower. I looked at the pen. Then I looked at him, with a gaze that had stared down union bosses and highway robbers. I didn't move, I didn't speak. I just let his desperation hang in the air, curdling like milk in the sun. "Come on," Luther Chase pleaded, his smile stretching into a rictus of terror. "Just sign the papers and we can end this charade. You are tired, I know you are tired. Do it for Nia. Do it for your legacy. My legacy." I repeated, my voice low and dangerous. "Son, you are looking at my legacy, and right now it is about to run you over." I lifted my right hand and snapped my fingers. The sound was crisp, sharp, a pistol shot in a canyon. Jamal, standing in the shadows by the AV cart, hit the spacebar. The projector beam cut through the dim light of the ballroom, hitting the massive white screen behind Chase with a blinding flash. Everyone turned, the lawyers, the mobsters, the fake investor, Nia. They all looked up as the first video began to play. It was grainy footage taken from a low-angle, hidden camera, but the image was unmistakable. It was the interior of Le Monde. The night of the dinner, the camera was focused on table 4, my table. Chase was there laughing, looking handsome and arrogant. And then, as I stood up to take the phone call, the camera caught it perfectly. The subtle movement of his hand, shielding Nia's movements as she poured the powder into my glass. The look they exchanged, a look of conspiratorial malice, the toast, the way he watched me drink with hungry eyes. A collective gasp went through the room like a sudden draft. The lawyers shifted uncomfortably, clutching their briefcases tighter. The Ivanovs didn't gasp, they just stared, their eyes narrowing, calculating the liability. Chase spun around, watching himself commit attempted murder on a 20-foot screen. "No!" he shouted, waving his hands at the projection as if he could erase the light that is not real. That is doctored deepfake technology. He is framing me. But the video cut to black, and then a new image appeared. This one was sharper, high-definition color. It was the kitchen of this very house dated 3 days ago. The timestamp in the corner read 9:42 p.m. The audio kicked in loud and clear, booming through the surround sound speakers. "You stupid, useless woman," Chase's voice roared, filling the room with his rage. On screen, Chase was backing Nia into the counter, his face twisted into a mask of ugliness that no tuxedo could hide. He was screaming at her, blaming her for the missing car, blaming her for his failures. And then the slap. The sound of his hand connecting with her face was sickening. A wet, meaty crack that made half the guests flinch. Nia, on the screen, fell to the floor, sobbing, begging him to stop. Chase stood over her, spitting words of venom, calling her pathetic, calling her weak, telling her he should have left her long ago. In the real room, the real Nia let out a whimper. She was standing by the buffet table, her hands covering her mouth, her eyes wide with shame. She was reliving the worst moment of her life in front of an audience of strangers. She looked at Chase and then she looked at me, her eyes begging me to stop, to turn it off, to spare her this final indignity. But I couldn't stop. Not yet. The tumor had to be cut out completely or it would just grow back. I am not done, I said, my voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. Look at him. Look at the man who wanted to run my company. Look at how he handles his business. The screen flickered again, and this time it wasn't a video. It was a slideshow of documents, screenshots taken from his computer thanks to the keylogger I had installed. The first image was a bank transfer authorization, a wire of $50,000 from the bank's trans-operating account to a crypto wallet labeled Miller Private. The next image was a text thread with the Ivanov syndicate promises of payment, promises of my assets, promises that the old man would be dead by Friday. Chase was backing away from the screen, now shaking his head, mumbling, "No, no, no," over and over again. He looked like a man trying to outrun his own shadow, but the light was everywhere. And finally the kill shot. The screen went black for a second, a dramatic pause that held the room in a vice grip. Then a photograph appeared, bright, sunny, colorful. It was a picture of a woman, a blonde woman, smiling on the porch of a house in Sandy Springs. She was holding a little boy, a toddler with sandy hair and eyes that were unmistakably Chase-esque. Below the photo were the text messages scrolling up the screen in large readable font. "Chase, baby. Hold on, the old man is proving difficult. I need 2 more days. Chase, I have the tickets, we leave Saturday morning. Just you, me, and Toby. Once I get the signature, we vanish. Let Naya deal with the fallout. She is an idiot. Better her than us." The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb, the silence of a world ending. Chase stopped moving. He stared at the picture of his secret family, his escape plan, his real life exposed to the people he had tried to con. He looked at the Ivanovs, who were now looking at him, not with anger, but with the cold professional detachment of men who realize a contract has just been canceled. He looked at the lawyers who were slowly backing toward the door. He looked at Reginald, who was shaking his head with genuine disgust. But the most terrible thing to watch was Nia. She didn't scream, she didn't run, she just crumbled. It was as if her skeleton had suddenly dissolved. The woman who had poisoned her father, who had stolen his art, who had plotted his demise, stood there and realized that she had done it all for nothing. She had sold her soul for a man who called her an idiot and planned to leave her holding the bag. She looked at the picture of the little boy, the son her husband had with another woman, while she was struggling with miscarriages, while she was desperate to give him an heir. She read the words, "Better her than us." A sound tore out of her throat, a low, guttural, keening noise that sounded like an animal caught in a trap. She fell to her knees, her expensive gown pooling around her on the floor. She clawed at her chest as if trying to rip her own heart out to stop the pain. Chase turned to her, his hands held out in a pleading gesture. "Nia, baby, listen. It is not what it looks like. He hacked my phone. He made it up. It is Photoshop." Nia looked up at him, her face a ruin of mascara and tears. She didn't see him anymore. She saw a stranger. She saw a monster. "You have a son," she whispered, her voice trembling so hard the words barely formed. "You have a son, and you were going to leave me here to die." Chase looked around the room, looking for an ally, looking for a way out, but there were no doors open to him anymore. The security guards had stepped forward, closing the circle. The Ivanovs were blocking the kitchen. The lawyers were gone. He looked at me, his eyes wide with madness. Why, he screamed. "Why are you doing this to us? Why didn't you just die?" I walked toward him, my cane tapping a steady rhythm on the floor, closing the distance between the man I was and the man he thought I was. "Because I am a father, Chase," I said, stopping in front of him, "and a father teaches his children. Even when the lesson is hard, you wanted my life, you wanted my money. Well, you got the attention. Now, son, you are the star of the show. Take a bow." Chase lunged. He didn't think, he didn't plan. He just reacted with the violence of a cornered rat. He reached into his tuxedo jacket, pulling out a small black pistol, a snub-nosed .38 cheap and deadly. He pointed it at my chest, his hand shaking so bad the barrel was dancing a jig. "Back off," he screamed. "Everyone back off. I will kill him. I swear to God, I will kill him." The room erupted in screams. Guests dove for the floor. Nia covered her head, sobbing. Jamal stepped forward, his hand reaching for his own weapon, but I held up a hand, stopping him. I looked at the gun, then I looked at Chase's eyes. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I had looked down the barrel of a gun before in darker places than this. "Shoot me." "Chase," I said, my voice calm, quiet. "Shoot me and see what happens." Chase pulled the trigger. Click. The sound was small, metallic, and final. There was no bang, there was no flash, just the sound of a firing pin hitting an empty chamber. Chase pulled it again. Click, 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 click. He stared at the gun in horror. He looked at me, betrayal written all over his face. "Jamal found it in your bag this afternoon, Chase," I said, shaking my head. "Never leave your weapon unattended, son. That is rule number 1. I took the liberty of removing the firing pin. You are not a killer, Chase. You are just a thief, and a bad one at that." Chase dropped the useless gun. It clattered onto the floor, spinning away from him. He looked at his hands. Then he looked at the Ivanovs, who were starting to move toward him, smiling, now smiling the way wolves smile at a limping deer. "Help me," he whispered, looking at me, looking at the man he tried to murder. "Help me, Luther. Please don't let them take me." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had destroyed my daughter, who had poisoned my body, who had tried to erase my legacy. I turned my back on him. "I have a meeting with my investors," I said, walking away toward the projection screen where the image of his betrayal still glowed bright and damning security show. "Mr. Miller out. I believe his ride is here." I didn't watch as the security guards grabbed him. I didn't watch as he screamed and kicked, dragging his feet across the floor. I didn't watch as they handed him over, not to the police, but to the streets outside where the Ivanovs were waiting to have a conversation about interest rates. I walked over to Nia, who was still on the floor, weeping over the picture of the little boy. I looked down at her, feeling a heaviness in my chest that no amount of money could fix. "Get up, Nia," I said, my voice tired. "Get up. The show is over." She looked up at me, and in her eyes I saw the end of everything. She reached out a hand toward me. "Daddy?" she whispered. "Please." But I didn't take it. My hands were full, holding the weight of what I had to do next. The silence that followed the hollow click of the firing pin was heavy enough to crush a man, and Chase Miller looked like he was being flattened by the weight of his own sins. He stood there staring at the useless gun in his hand, his knuckles white, his breath coming in short, jagged gasps. He looked from the weapon to me and back again, his brain trying to comprehend why I wasn't bleeding on the expensive Persian rug, why the loud bang he had steeled himself for never came, why the world hadn't ended the way he planned. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I just leaned on my cane, watching the realization wash over him like a cold tide. He had pulled the trigger. He had made the choice in the eyes of the law, and in the eyes of God, he was a murderer. He just happened to be a murderer with an empty gun, thanks to Jamal, who had the foresight to check the bag while Chase was busy preening in the mirror upstairs. "Drop it, Chase," I said, my voice low and steady, cutting through the quiet like a razor. "You are embarrassing yourself." Chase let the gun slip from his fingers. It hit the floor with a dull thud, spinning away under the buffet table. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and glassy, panic setting in deep. He looked at the security guards who were now moving in closer, hands on their holsters ready to drop him. If he twitched, he looked at the Ivanovs who were watching with the cold amusement of men who knew they would get their money one way or another. But then his eyes darted to Reginald, the man he thought was Marcus Sterling, the billionaire savior, the man who was supposed to wire $300 million into his account and fly him to freedom. Chase stumbled toward him, hands out, pleading, desperate. "Mr. Sterling, please," Chase begged, ignoring the fact that he just tried to shoot his father-in-law, ignoring the video evidence on the screen, ignoring the ruin of his life. "You saw that, right? He threatened me." "It was self-defense. Listen, we can still do the deal. I have the papers right here. Just sign them and we can go. The plane is waiting." He was delusional. He was broken. He was trying to sell a burning house while standing in the flames. Reginald stood up slowly. He didn't look like a bored billionaire anymore. He didn't look like an actor playing a part. He reached into the inside pocket of his three-piece suit, but he didn't pull out a checkbook and he didn't pull out a pen. He pulled out a leather wallet, flipped it open, and held it up. The gold badge inside caught the light of the chandelier shining with the authority of the federal government. "My name is not Marcus Sterling." "Reginald," said his voice, stripping away the fake transatlantic accent, revealing the hard, flat tone of law enforcement, "and I am not an investor, Chase. I am Special Agent Reynolds with the FBI Financial Crimes Division." Chase froze. He looked at the badge, then at the agent, then at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. FBI, he whispered, the color draining from his face, leaving him gray and corpse-like. We have been watching the Ivanov syndicate for 2 years. Reynolds continued, stepping around the table, walking toward Chase with the inevitable stride of justice. We were waiting for them to make a move on a legitimate business to try and launder a large sum through a corporate acquisition. Imagine our surprise when we tapped your phone, Chase, and heard you offering to launder it for them. Imagine our surprise when we heard you planning wire fraud, interstate commerce violations, and conspiracy to commit murder. Chase started to shake his knees, knocking together. No, that is entrapment. You cannot do this. I want a lawyer. You will get a lawyer, Reynolds said, snapping a pair of handcuffs off his belt. But not the kind you pay for with stolen money. You are going to need a public defender's son because all your assets just got frozen about 10 minutes ago. Chase looked at me, betrayal written all over his face, as if I were the one who had wronged him. As if I were the villain in his story. You set me up, he hissed. You wore a wire. You brought the feds into our house. I walked over to him, stopping just outside of striking range. I looked him up and down, taking the measure of the man who thought he could outsmart a lifetime of experience. I didn't bring them here, Chase, I said, my voice calm, cold. I just opened the door. You invited them in the moment you decided to sell my company to the mob, the moment you decided that my life was worth less than your debt. Reynolds spun Chase around, slamming him against the wall and cuffing his hands behind his back. The click of the steel ratchets was the loudest sound in the room. Chase groaned, his forehead pressed against the silk wallpaper, defeat finally settling in. But Nia wasn't done. She was still on the floor, clutching the photo of Chase's secret son. But now she scrambled up, her eyes wide with a new kind of panic. The panic of a woman realizing the money was gone, the safety net was gone, and the parachute was on fire. Daddy, she cried, running toward me, ignoring her husband in handcuffs, ignoring the federal agent, ignoring everything but the terrifying reality of her future. Daddy. Wait, the deal. The company, you haven't sold it yet, right? If Chase is arrested, we can still save it, we can still sell it, we can pay off the debts, we can fix this, I can run it, Daddy, I can take over. She was still bargaining, she still didn't get it. She thought this was just a setback, she thought the $300 million was still on the table waiting for her to grab it. She thought that because Chase was the bad guy, she automatically became the good guy. She didn't understand that she was just the getaway driver who fell asleep at the wheel. I looked at her, my daughter, the girl I named after my mother, the girl I promised to protect, and I felt a deep, aching sorrow. But underneath the sorrow was the steel foundation of my resolve. There is no company to sell, Nia, I said, my voice heavy with the weight of the final blow. She stopped, blinking, confused. What do you mean? Of course there is banks. The trucks, the warehouses, the contracts, it is worth millions. It was worth millions, I corrected her past tense. I reached into my tuxedo jacket and pulled out a folded document. It wasn't a contract. It wasn't a bill of sale. It was a deed of gift, notarized, stamped, and filed with the state of Georgia at 9 a.m. this morning while Chase was getting his hair done and Nia was picking out her dress. I didn't sell the company, Nia, I said, unfolding the paper, holding it up so she could see the seal, so the whole room could see the truth. I gave it away. Nia stared at the paper, her eyes scanning the legal jargon, trying to find the loophole, trying to find the lie. Gave it away. She whispered, to who? To the Betty Banks Foundation. I said the name tasting sweet on my tongue. I transferred 100% of the shares, the assets, the intellectual property, and the real estate to a charitable trust in your mother's name. As of this morning, Banks Trans is a non-profit organization dedicated to providing vocational training and scholarships for underprivileged youth in Atlanta. I am just the chairman emeritus, an honorary advisor with no ownership stake and no salary. The room went silent again, stunned by the magnitude of the move. The lawyers in the back dropped their heads, knowing there were no fees to be collected here. The Ivanovs looked at each other, realizing there was no pot of gold at the end of this rainbow, just a locked vault. You gave it away. Nia screamed, her voice shredding the air. You gave away my inheritance. You gave away $300 million to charity. I didn't give away your inheritance, Nia, I said, stepping closer to her, letting her see the fire in my eyes. I gave away my life, this work, to people who will appreciate it. I gave it to kids who know what it means to hunger, who know what it means to work, who won't try to poison their benefactors for a villa in Brazil. "But what about me?" she wailed, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup, making her look like a tragic clown. "What about me, Daddy? I am your daughter. I deserve that money. I put up with everything for that money, and that is exactly why you don't have it," I said, my voice hard, unyielding. "You didn't want the company. Naya, you wanted the check. You didn't want the legacy. You wanted the lifestyle. Well, the lifestyle just got canceled." I looked at Chase, pressed against the wall by the agent, listening to his dreams turn to ash. I looked at Nia, weeping on the floor, mourning her bank account, not her marriage or her father, and I felt lighter than I had in years. The burden was gone. The target on my back was gone. The golden handcuffs were unlocked. "You cannot rob a man who has nothing," I said, looking at the Ivanovs, sending a clear message to the wolves in the room. "The money is gone. The assets are untouchable. The well is dry. Go home." The Ivanovs didn't say a word. They just turned and walked out, disappearing into the night like smoke. They knew when a game was rigged. They knew when to fold. Chase watched them go, terror in his eyes, knowing that federal prison was now the safest place on earth for him, knowing that if he ever walked free, he would be looking over his shoulder for the rest of his short life. Nia looked up at me, her face a mask of disbelief. "You ruined us," she whispered. "You ruined everything." "No, baby girl," I said, sadness softening the edges of my anger. "I saved you. I saved you from becoming him. I saved you from thinking that money is a substitute for a soul. You are broke. Nia, you are homeless and you are alone, and for the first time in your life you are going to have to figure out who you are without my checkbook." I turned to Jamal, who was standing by the projector, a grim look of satisfaction on his face. "Cut the feed, son. Show is over." The screen went dark, the images of betrayal vanishing, leaving only the stark reality of the room. I adjusted my cuffs, checked my watch, and turned to walk away. I had a steak dinner waiting for me at a diner downtown, a place where the coffee was hot, the waitress called you honey, and nobody tried to kill you for the tip. I walked past my daughter, who was still crying on the floor, past my son-in-law, who was being read his rights, and out the front door into the cool night air. The rain had stopped. The stars were out, and for the first time in a long time, I felt clean. The heavy oak doors of the mansion burst open again, but this time it was not a waiter or a guest. It was a tactical team of uniformed officers swarming into the foyer with the precision of a storm breaking. Land. Agent Reynolds stepped back, holstering his badge, his job as the architect of the sting complete. Now it was time for the cleanup crew. Chase was hauled up from the floor, his tuxedo jacket ripped at the shoulder, his face a mask of disbelief and snot. He tried to kick out at the officers, screaming about his rights, screaming about entrapment, screaming that he was Chase Miller, and nobody touched him. "You have the right to remain silent," an officer droned, pushing Chase's face against the silk wallpaper. His voice monotone and bored. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Chase twisted his head, looking at me with eyes that were bulging out of his skull. "Luther, tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them we were just playing a game. I am family. Luther, family doesn't do this." I leaned on my cane, watching the metal cuffs bite into his wrists, watching the reality of a life sentence settle onto his shoulders like a lead blanket. "Family," I said, my voice carrying over the commotion. "Family doesn't pour neurotoxin into a man's wine glass. Chase family doesn't borrow money from the mob and their father-in-law. His name, you are right. Family doesn't do this. Criminals do." The officer yanked him upright. "Chase Miller, you are under arrest for the attempted murder of Luther Banks, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, embezzlement, and grand larceny. Let us go." They dragged him toward the door, his heels scraping grooves into the expensive hardwood floor. He was weeping now, ugly, sobbing sounds that echoed in the cavernous room, begging Nia to help him, begging me to stop them, begging God to wake him up from the nightmare, but God wasn't listening, and neither was I. As Chase disappeared into the night, into the back of a squad car where he belonged, the room seemed to exhale. The tension broke, leaving behind a silence that was heavy with the smell of fear and expensive perfume. Nia was still on the floor amidst the ruins of her life. She watched her husband being taken away, and then slowly, painfully, she turned her head to look at me. She looked like a broken doll, her expensive gown torn, her hair a bird's nest of tangles, her makeup smeared across her face like war paint. She looked at the empty doorway where the Ivanovs had exited. She looked at the screen where the evidence of her betrayal had played, And then she looked at me. Her father, the man she had tried to erase. She didn't stand up. She didn't try to run. She crawled. She crawled across the floor on her hands and knees, dragging herself toward me like a penitent pilgrim seeking a miracle. She reached out and wrapped her arms around my legs, burying her face against my trousers, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. "Daddy," she wailed, her voice muffled by the fabric. "Daddy, please, you have to listen to me. I didn't want to do it. He made me. He tricked me. I was brainwashed, Daddy. I am a victim, too. Look at what he did to me. Look at the bruises. He hit me. He threatened me. I was scared. I was so scared." I looked down at the top of her head, at the dark roots showing through the expensive dye job. I felt the wetness of her tears soaking into my pants leg. For 40 years, I had been her shield. I had protected her from the rain, from the cold, from the consequences of her own bad decisions. When she crashed her car, I bought her a new one when she failed a class. I hired a tutor when she married a shark. I bought them a tank. I had spent a lifetime catching her every time she fell, but not tonight. I reached down, but not to stroke her hair, not to comfort her. I reached down and firmly pried her fingers off my leg, one by one, breaking her grip, breaking the connection. "Stop it, Nia," I said, my voice flat, devoid of the warmth she was searching for. "Get up off the floor. Have some dignity for once in your life." She looked up at me, her hands hovering in the air, rejected, "Daddy. Please, I am your little girl. I didn't know he was going to hurt you. I thought it was just a sleeping pill. I swear on Mommy Et's grave, I thought he just wanted you to sleep so we could sign the papers. I am innocent, Daddy. I was manipulated." "Liar." The word hung in the air, simple and devastating. I stepped back, putting distance between us, opening the space where a relationship used to be. "You stood in that restaurant, Nia," I said, looking her dead in the eye. "You stood there and you watched me lift that glass to my lips. You knew what was in it. You knew it wasn't a sleeping pill because you bought it, you sourced it, you paid for it with the credit card. You stole from me." Nia shook her head frantically. No, that is not true." "I saw your face when Chase started seizing," I continued, my voice rising, thunder rolling in the distance. "You didn't scream for help. You didn't call an ambulance. You screamed at me. You asked why I switched the glasses. You weren't worried about him dying. You were angry that I wasn't the one on the floor. That is not manipulation, Nia. That is malice. That is cold-blooded murder in a red dress." She froze her mouth open, her lies dying in her throat. She knew I was right. She knew there was no spinning that moment, no rewriting the script. She had revealed her heart in that split second, and it was black. I reached into the inside pocket of my tuxedo jacket. I felt the weight of the thick manila envelope resting there, heavy as a tombstone. I had carried it all night, waiting for this moment, waiting to see if there was a shred of redemption left in her. If she had confessed, if she had shown true remorse, maybe things would be different. But she was still lying. She was still playing the victim. She was still Chase S. partner even now. I pulled the envelope out and threw it down. It hit the floor in front of her with a heavy slap, sliding across the wood until it bumped against her knees. "What is this?" she whispered, looking at it like it was a bomb. "Open it," I said. She picked it up, her hands shaking so bad she tore the paper. Getting it open, she pulled out the stack of documents, thick legal briefs bound with heavy staples. She read the first page, and a gasp tore out of her throat, a sound of pure shock. "Disownment," she whispered, looking up at me, horror dawning in her eyes. "Termination of parental rights, removal from the will restraining order. Daddy, you cannot do this." "Keep reading," I said, cold as the grave. "Look at the second section." She flipped the pages, her eyes scanning the text, widening with every line. Photographs slipped out, falling onto the floor. Photos of her meeting with the forger, photos of her buying the chemicals, photos of her text messages calling me a useless old fool. "This is evidence." "Nia," I said, pointing my cane at the papers scattered around her. "Evidence of conspiracy to commit murder, evidence of fraud, evidence of elder abuse. That file contains everything the police need to put you in a cell right next to your husband for 20 years. Nia dropped the papers. She looked at me terrified, realizing for the first time that I held her life in my hands. "You are going to send me to prison," she whispered. "You are going to send your own daughter to jail." I looked at her. I looked at the face that reminded me so much of Betty, the eyes that used to look at me with love before they looked at me with greed. I felt a crack in my heart, a deep fissure of pain that would never heal. But I also felt the steel of my resolve. "No," I said quietly. Nia slumped, relief washing over her, making her sob. "I am not going to call the police on you, Nia," I said, my voice heavy with the weight of the decision. "Not because you don't deserve it, you do. You deserve to rot in a cage for what you tried to do to me. But I am not going to do it because of your mother. Because if I put you in prison, Betty would never forgive me. Even in heaven, she loved you too much to see you in chains. So I am giving you mercy." "Thank you, Daddy. Thank you," she cried, reaching for me again. "Oh God, thank you. I promise I will make it up to you. I will change. I will take care of you." I stepped back, my face hardening into stone. "Do not thank me, and do not call me Daddy. I am not sending you to prison, Nia, but I am sentencing you to something else. Look at those papers again. That is a legal severance effective immediately. You are not my heir, you are not my beneficiary, and as of this moment, you are not my daughter." Nia stopped crying. She stared at me, the silence stretching out thin and tight. "I cut you off," I said, my voice ringing in the empty hall. "The bank accounts are closed, the credit cards are canceled, the trust fund is dissolved. The house. This house that you stole is being foreclosed on by the bank tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. You have until then to get out, take your clothes, take your shoes, take whatever you can carry, but leave everything I paid for." "But where will I go?" she whispered, panic rising in her voice again. "I have no money. I have nowhere to go. Chase spent everything." "I don't know," I said, shrugging, adjusting my cufflinks, "and I don't care. You are young, you are healthy. You have 2 hands, figure it out, get a job, scrub floors, wait tables, drive a truck, do what I did, start from nothing, because that is exactly what you have now. Nothing." "But Daddy..." "No." I roared, the sound making her flinch, making the security guard step forward, making the windows rattle enough. "I gave you everything. Nia, I gave you a life most people dream of, and you tried to kill me for more. You broke the covenant. You broke the bond. You are a stranger to me now. A stranger with my last name, and I want it back." I turned my back on her. I couldn't look at her anymore. I couldn't look at the wreckage of my family. I signaled to Jamal, who was waiting by the door, his face grim. "Let us go, son," I said. "I am done here." I walked toward the door, my footsteps echoing on the floor, leaving Nia sitting amidst the legal papers and the photos of her crimes. She was sobbing again, calling out to me, begging me to turn around, begging me to fix it, to save her one last time. "Daddy, please, don't leave me. Daddy, I am sorry. Daddy, come back." I walked out the front door into the cool night air, the wind drying the sweat on my brow. The sound of the door closing behind me was the heaviest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a book closing, the sound of a life ending. I walked down the driveway, past the spot where the Bentley used to be, past the manicured lawn that Chase loved so much. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't look back at the window where I knew she was watching. I climbed into the back of the limousine, Jamal holding the door for me. He looked at me, his young face full of questions, full of sorrow. "Mr. Banks, are you okay?" I looked at him. I looked at this kid who had saved my life, who had stood by me when my own blood tried to drain me dry. "I am fine, Jamal," I said, settling into the seat. "Drive me to the diner. I want a steak, and I want to talk to you about law school." The car pulled away, leaving the mansion behind, leaving the darkness behind. As we turned onto the main road, the city lights of Atlanta spread out before us, a sea of stars and concrete. I felt a tear roll down my cheek, hot and slow. I wiped it away. I had lost a daughter, but I had kept my soul, and in the end, that was the only ledger that mattered. The gavel came down with a sound that echoed like a thunderclap in the heavy air of the courtroom, marking the end of a trial that had captivated Atlanta for 6 months. Chase Miller stood in his orange jumpsuit, chains rattling at his waist, his face gaunt and pale, stripped of the spray tan and the arrogance that had defined him for so long. He didn't look at the judge. He didn't look at his lawyer. He looked at me, sitting in the front row, gripping my cane with hands that were finally steady. Life without the possibility of parole, the judge said, his voice flat, devoid of sympathy for the man who had tried to murder his way to a fortune, plus 20 years for fraud, embezzlement, and grand larceny to be served consecutively. Chase slumped forward, his forehead hitting the defense table. He let out a sob, a pathetic sound that made the gallery shift uncomfortably, but I felt nothing. No joy, no sorrow. just the cold satisfaction of a balance sheet finally zeroed out. He was going to a place where his Italian suits and his crypto schemes meant nothing, a place where he would have a long, long time to think about the glass of wine he tried to feed me. As the bailiffs hauled him away, dragging him through the side door toward the transport van, Chase turned one last time looking for Nia, looking for salvation, but the seat beside me was empty. Nia wasn't there. She hadn't come to a single day of the trial. She was busy learning the hardest lesson of her life. I walked out of the courthouse into the blinding sunshine, surrounded by reporters shouting questions, asking if I felt vindicated. Asking what I would do next, I didn't answer them. I pushed through the crowd, flanked by Jamal and my security team, getting into the back of my car. I had one more stop to make before I left this city behind. We drove to a small rundown diner on the outskirts of Decatur, a place with a flickering neon sign and grease stains on the windows. I told the driver to wait, and I sat there watching through the tinted glass inside. I could see the kitchen door swinging open and closed. And there she was. Nia was wearing a stained apron, her hair tied back in a hairnet, her hands red and raw from the hot water and the harsh soap she was scrubbing. Plates scraping off leftover food, stacking them in the industrial washer. She looked tired. She looked older. But for the first time in her life, she looked real. She wasn't wearing diamonds. She wasn't carrying a $20,000 bag. She was earning minimum wage plus tips, and she was doing it on her feet 8 hours a day. She had tried to call me a few times in the beginning, begging for a loan, begging for a room, but I had blocked the numbers. I had returned her letters unopened. I watched her wipe sweat from her forehead with the back of her wrist. She said something to the cook, and he laughed. She smiled a small, genuine smile that I hadn't seen since she was a child. It wasn't a smile for a camera or a rich husband. It was just a human moment born of shared labor. My hand hovered over the door handle. Part of me, the father part that had spoiled her for 30 years, wanted to get out, wanted to walk in there and write a check to buy the diner to save her from the struggle. But then I remembered the poison, I remembered the betrayal, and I remembered the lesson I had failed to teach her the first time around. If I went in there now, I would rob her again. I would rob her of the dignity of survival. I would rob her of the chance to build something real, even if it was just a stack of clean plates. She needed this. She needed the heat and the grease and the aching feet. She needed to know that she could stand on her own without my money holding her up. I pulled my hand back. "Drive," I said to the chauffeur. "Let us go home." But I wasn't going back to the mansion in Buckhead. That house was gone, sold 3 weeks ago to a tech billionaire from Silicon Valley. I had sold it fully furnished, leaving behind the memories, the ghosts, and the bad energy. I didn't want the chandeliers. I didn't want the marble floors. I wanted peace. We drove 3 hours south, leaving the traffic and the noise of Atlanta behind. The landscape changed from skyscrapers to pine trees, from concrete to red clay. We pulled onto a gravel road winding through 50 acres of farmland that smelled of rain and earth. This was my new kingdom, a small farmhouse with a wraparound porch, a fishing pond stocked with bass, and silence, lots of silence. I had traded the penthouse for a tractor, and I had never been happier. I got out of the car, taking a deep breath of the country air. Jamal was there waiting for me on the porch. He wasn't wearing a waiter S uniform anymore, and he wasn't wearing a security suit. He was wearing a hoodie and jeans, holding a thick envelope in his hands. "Welcome home, Mr. Banks," Jamal said, smiling that wide, bright smile that reminded me so much of myself. I walked up the steps, my cane thumping on the wood. I sat down in the rocking chair, looking out over the water. "Sit down, son," I said, pointing to the chair next to me. "We have business to discuss." Jamal sat down looking nervous. He had finished his undergraduate degree last week, top of his class, funded entirely by the scholarship I set up. Now he was looking at law schools, thinking about the future. I took the envelope from him and placed it on the table between us. Inside were the papers. Cohen had drawn up the final piece of the puzzle, the final adjustment to the legacy. "You did good, Jamal," I said, looking at him. "You saved my life, you saved my company, and you stood by me when my own blood tried to drain me dry. You have integrity, son, and integrity is a currency that never devalues." I pushed the envelope toward him. "Open it." Jamal opened the flap and pulled out the documents. He read the first page, and his eyes went wide. His hands started to shake, just like Nia S. had, but for a very different reason. "Adoption papers," he whispered, looking up at me, tears forming in his eyes. "Mr. Banks, I don't understand." "It is Luther," I corrected him, "and you understand perfectly. I have no son, Jamal. I have a biological daughter who is finding her own way, but I have no son to carry the name, to carry the values I built this life on. I want you to be that son. I want to adopt you formally, legally. You will be Jamal Banks. You will go to law school. You will learn the business, and one day, you will run the foundation. You will protect the legacy." Jamal couldn't speak. He just nodded, tears spilling over, running down his face. He stood up and hugged me. A real hug, strong and grateful. Not looking for a wallet, but looking for a father. I hugged him back, patting his back, feeling the knot in my chest finally loosen. We sat there for a long time watching the sun go down over the water. The crickets started to chirp. A frog croaked by the pond. It was the sound of peace, the sound of a life reset. I thought about Chase rotting in his cell, thinking about the millions he almost had. I thought about Naya scrubbing dishes in Decatur, learning the value of $1 the hard way. And I thought about Betty looking down on us, smiling because I had finally fixed the mistake we made. I wasn't lonely anymore. I had a son, I had a purpose, and I had a fishing pole. I picked up the rod leaning against the rail and cast the line into the dark water. The lure hit the surface with a soft splash, sending ripples out in perfect concentric circles. "So, Jamal," I said, settling back into the chair, "tell me about this torts class you are worried about. I think I know a thing or two about liability." Jamal laughed, wiping his eyes, and started talking, and for the first time in years I wasn't listening for a lie, I was just listening. I spent 40 years building an empire of steel and wheels, believing that providing a life of luxury was the ultimate expression of love. I was wrong in my blind pursuit to give my daughter everything I never had. I robbed her of the one thing she needed most. The struggle that builds character wealth without values is just fuel for a fire that will eventually burn your house down. I lost a daughter to greed, but I found a son in loyalty. The blood in your veins doesn't make you family. The integrity in your soul does. And sometimes you have to let the tower crumble to save the foundation. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about justice, redemption, and the hard truths of life. See you in the next one.